if you're getting ready to plan your November away and to feel really confident as you're heading into November on November the 1st, then this is going to be quite helpful. What I'm doing in this video is I'm examining the current planetary picture and the planetary pictures that are coming up. This includes all the planets that are moving from one sign to another and what they'll mean to you. Also, looking at the impact of Uranus making oppositions to not only Mars and Mercury, but also to the Sun and Venus. That's a lot of oppositions to Uranus, and that's going to definitely flavour the energy in November. It's going to be kind of crackling. We've also got a whole series of grand trines, grand water trines, but they're transforming over and over again throughout the month. So we've got Jupiter, Saturn and Neptune making a grand trine with the Sun, with Mercury and also with Venus. And that's not all. We've also got Mercury Retrograde starting on the 9th and then going direct on the 29th. So what does this all mean? Well, that's what I'm going to be examining. At the start of this video, I'm going to be looking at all the different patterns and kind of tuning into the energy. And at the end, there's going to be a chapter by chapter, sign by sign ascendant forecast, giving you the high level ideas of what's going to bring you joy in this month ahead, and what are you really bringing yourself to, you know, like how can you move forwards. I'm really looking at it from the perspective of how you can move using this really smooth water energy, but also this jumpstart energy that Uranus is giving us. And let's not forget the Mercury retrograde. Now, if you're new to this channel, hi, my name is Louisa Tanner Munson. And with Feel Good Astrology, I'm always looking at astrology from as many different angles as I can to give you the clearest picture for you to be able to use. You know, I find traditional astrology, especially when I was learning about astrology, you know, there's a lot of knowledge out there that seems really kind of fatalistic. Like, you know, if the moon goes into Aquarius and, you know, if it's in the 7th house and Jupiter aligns to Mars and all that jazz, that it means one definite thing. And I just don't see that, you know, from my perspective, and I'm a bit intuitive. I really see that astrology, what it's doing is giving us a really good story. It's giving us, you know, the picture. It's almost like, one of those pictures that you're drawing with numbers. It's like one clue to another, to another, to another. And over the course of understanding all these different numbers, you get a clear picture that's showing up. So what I'm hoping to do is bring that picture out in this video. So let's bring up my slides. I always work with slides. Something else just to bear in mind before we get going is we've got the full moon in Taurus, and we'll also have the new moon in Scorpio in this month ahead. And, you know, the Taurus and the Scorpio energy, you know, the polarity between the two of them, they're always in opposition. As you can see here, Scorpio's down here and Taurus is up here. There's always some subcontext about self-worth, value, comfort, and then a quiet depth. You know, this is, I think about us finding comfort in our bodies, but also in our emotions, and possibly becoming a silent witness in one way or another. There's a lot of mysteries, you know, with the Scorpio energy. So I do think we're going to have quite a rich time of it. We've also got Uranus and Mercury in an opposition throughout this whole time. That's because Mercury is going retrograde. If you want to know more about that, then check out my Uranus and Mercury opposition video, I think called Expect the Unexpected, which I posted just yesterday. We've also got Venus. You know, Venus is the planet of the month. You know, she is making the most amount of aspects in this month ahead after the moon. She is, not only is she going to go into the sign of Scorpio, but she's also going to go into the sign of Sagittarius too. So she's a real mover and a shaker this month. So yeah, lots of questions about security. You know, the Taurus and Scorpio are really bringing up this idea of security and value. But then as the planets start to move into the sign of Sagittarius, a new theme is coming out, and that's also about freedom. Freedom and lightheartedness, and yeah, there's a bit of an adventure brewing. So let's go a bit deeper. Now, actually, before I bring up anything else, I just want to say thank you to everybody that supports this channel in all the different ways that you do. Really, truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. You really do bring me so much in my life. I'm very grateful. So these are the ingresses in November 2025. We've got Mars going into Sagittarius right at the start on the 4th. Couple of days later, we've got Venus going into Scorpio on the 6th. And then on the 8th, we've got Uranus backing. He's retrograding from Gemini and back into Taurus. We've then got Mercury retrograding from Sagittarius into Scorpio. So there's 2 retrograde ingresses. And then at the end of the month, we've got the Sun going into Sagittarius on the 22nd, and finally Venus going into into Sagittarius on the 30th. Now, why I've pointed these out is you can see that, you know, between the 4th and the 6th, is the 4th and the 8th, just 4 days, we've got 3 planetary moves, and then, you know, the 19th to the 22nd is also pretty big. There's also a new moon in there. In fact, between the 4th and the 8th, we've also got the full moon. So, you know, the 4th to the 8th is a really busy time. And then I would say the 19th to 22nd is also really busy. Every time a planet changes signs, it's like it's signing off on part of its journey and starting kind of, it's changing its energy to a new theme. So it feels like there is this energetic shift. And so, you know, for instance, Mars going from his own sign in Scorpio, where, you know, Mars is all about action, taking action. You know, he's got a bit of fight in him for sure. You know, and Mars is about confidence and about movement. It's not a stagnant sign at all. You know, so Mars is always looking to thrive and thrust. So when he's going from Scorpio, where he's really at home and is able to move with real power. I mean, he's on a real power trip in the sign of Scorpio. When he goes into Sagittarius, you know, the fight is still there, but it's not all about power. It's more about this sort of generous outpouring, you know, and he might want to fight with ideas. You know, Sagittarius is very much about ideas, very philosophical sign, and it can be quite religious. You know, religious wars can get started in the sign of Sagittarius. I think Pluto in Sagittarius was quite a big time for religious wars and wars, you know, battled out because of a difference in culture. You know, so Mars coming into the sign of Sagittarius, you know, we're going to get a different kind of action, a different kind of thrusting forwards. And so our ideas, our need for adventure, our need to feel free to take action is going to be strong. So that's something that's really, you know, we're really experiencing as we're going on through the month. Venus going into Scorpio is going to be interesting because she's also been in her own sign, and she's been quite graceful in the sign of Libra. She really likes that. When Venus goes into Scorpio, she gets real hardcore. So, you know, the way she wants to relate to people can be quite sexual, quite deep. You know, expect your conversations to go much deeper. You know, you're reaching somebody at a much deeper level. You know, Venus can get quite jealous, a little bit possessive. And so you might find possession becomes quite important. It's also quite acquisitive. You know, like she acquires things quite a bit in the sign of Scorpio. She's also a bit more bad-tempered in the sign of Scorpio. And she's powerful. So you might find relationships are shifting a little bit in terms of power as well. And then Uranus going back into Taurus. Well, you know, Uranus went into Taurus in 2018 and has been there ever since. Apart from on the 7th of July this year, he moved into the sign of Gemini. Now he's going back into Taurus just for this last part of his journey. And he's going to be there until the 26th of April, 2026. So he's still got quite a bit of time there. One of the things with Uranus and Taurus, like Uranus shakes things up and changes the energy, changes our consciousness about things. And, you know, Uranus is actually pretty technological, innovative, and creates chaos. You know, can really cut things off and then start something brand new. And so given that Taurus represents value and resources and also comfort, we might find that there's a real change with our ideas on money and comfort and the way banks are formulated or set up. I know there's been a lot of talk over the last couple of years, well, actually for many years now, about digital currency and crypto. And, I know in England, when I haven't lived in England for 8 years, but I remember the last few years I was in England, all of a sudden the bank tellers were all disappearing. All of a sudden everything was really automated and streamlined, and you're really interacting with a computer. A bit like, when you go shopping, there's fewer tellers there to help you buy your foods. You have to go through the personal checkout. And so it really wouldn't surprise me as Uranus comes back into Taurus in this next season from November until the end of April next year. I really think there's going to be some big movements and shifts in the financial markets and in terms of how people are interacting with systems, in particular systems that are giving us comfort, money, resources that we need, like food. Food's a real thing, with Taurus. Now, when these slow-moving planets change signs, we often really feel the shudder and the shake of things. And I always think that when these slow-moving signs, they move into another sign and they often step back before going into their final destination. And I often think any unfinished business, a bit like... I'm trying to think of a really good real life example. For the life of me, I can't think of one. But to me, it just feels like, Uranus was on a bit of a rush to get into the sign of Gemini, and there were some things that he just didn't attend to. And so, retrospectively, he's now going back to finish off the work that he should have completed a little bit sooner. So I do think there's going to be a sense of rush, a sense of completion. And so anyone involved in these kinds of activities like banking and insurance and things to do with luxury, security and comfort, things are going to change, I think. I think there's going to be a lot of organisations putting in some big, hard stops and new starts. Now, of course, I don't want to talk about what's going on out there. I'm really interested in talking about what's happening to you, what's happening to me, and anyone else that might be listening. And so how do we pare this down to us at a real personal level? Well, I think whatever changes you've been going through for the last 7 years, in particular, changes to do with your own feelings of comfort, your own resources, how you're managing your resources, also how much self-love you've got and self-esteem, how you value yourself, all those things that you've put off that you should have already done, all of a sudden they're going to come back on the radar with some intensity. And it could really bring about a huge completion and clearing. And of course, November is starting that for you. So, that's why I think the 4th to the 8th is so important. In between times, we've got the full moon as well. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on. And then we've got Mercury retrograding back into Scorpio. It's going to be here. It's going to be an interesting one because Mercury is going to be retrograde, and these Mercury retrogrades can really set us going. They can really cause a bit of confusion. The retrograde starts on the 8th and is going, he's moving back from 6 degrees in the sign of Sagittarius and back into Taurus. Back into Scorpio, sorry. If you've got something around 6 degrees in Sagittarius, and I do actually, exactly 6 degrees. If you've got something maybe like 4 or 5 degrees either side, so from let's just say from 0 Sagittarius to like 10, 11, 12 degrees in Sagittarius, you're going to be feeling this Mercury retrograde. And of course, the closer Mercury is to 6 degrees Sagittarius, if you've got something on there, your thinking about that planet's going to be altered. Mercury retrograde, I think, is showing us where we get a chance to review and catch up. And it can create some chaos. So again, and in line with what I was saying with Uranus, anything that you've left to chance, that you were really needing to work on, in particular things that are going to help you live your life with more authenticity, with a greater sense of philosophy and context and faith, and also expansion, which are all the Sagittarius themes. As Mercury goes retrograde back into Scorpio, I think you're really starting to mull things over and kind of going back into the darker ramifications of your master plan. So maybe there's a plan or two that you're reinvestigating and recommitting to. I always think the words are really important with Mercury retrograde, because we're just completely pulling our ideas and our communications back. We're just reeling it in, and then once we've brought it back enough, it's almost like we're rewinding a video and trying to get to the most important point, where all of a sudden we realize, this is where I pivot. And so I think, we're going to be looking over some of our decisions in recent times until we get to this pivot point, which I see really happening on the 29th of November, when Mercury gets back to 20 degrees Scorpio. Again, if you've got something at 20 degrees Scorpio, that's also going to show how you're moving forwards. And then, the sun will move into Sagittarius, and that will really awaken the Sagittarius energy. And then finally, Venus goes into Sagittarius. So we've got this theme of the secrets, the darkness, the richness, the power games, how you might want to be a bit quiet and reflective. Scorpio isn't necessarily a loud sign. It likes to think things through in the background. And then once things start to shift into Sagittarius, which does like to communicate and can be really loud and very expressive, you might find that all of a sudden your energy starts to just really move ahead and really push. So let's look a little bit deeper still. So if we include the full moon in Taurus, sorry, it's my husband if you heard a clatter there, I think that's my husband dropping a saucepan. We got the full moon in Taurus that's happening at 13 degrees, if I've got that right. So again, if you've got a planet or an angle at 13 degrees, that full moon is going to feel very, very personal. Now, what interests me is that we've got a full moon in Taurus, so the Taurus energies are coming up for us to feel and get really conscious about before Uranus comes back into Taurus. So to me, the full moon in Taurus on the 5th of November, and the 5th of November has lots of sort of historical ideas, like the remember the 5th of November, Guy Fawkes Day, being a full moon. To me, this is a time when things really do, blow up, things get lit, under that big bonfire. To me, this could be a time when we really let go of the things that we've been holding on to, that we really need to kind of burn out of our lives, where, around the time of the full moon, often we find lots of patterns coming up and lots of information, lots of things coming towards us. I always think of it as, like an emotional overwhelm. There's almost too much for us to process. And so as you kind of grab hold of these extra things, these superfluous things, it's almost like you might choose to filter through all these extra things that are coming up and make a decision there and then and say, that's not for me, that's not for me, that's not for me, I'm done with that, I'll keep this. So I really see it like we're sorting through something, a bit like the sorting hat in Harry Potter, so we're sorting what we're going to keep and what we're going to ditch. And so that could be quite good practice. And, it's quite symbolic with, the 5th of November. And, from the beginning of November until around the 5th, we do have this like thinning of the veils that the Wiccan traditions talk about. And Samhain, these festivals of light and festivals of spirit, an All Souls Day. So this is a time when, we might be letting go of ancestral things as well, not just what's here and up close and personal right now. And like I said, this is going to be getting us ready for Uranus coming back into Taurus. And so again, those themes of Taurus is comfort and the senses. How can we feast our senses? How can we feel secure? How can we feel like we've got enough resources? Lots of real deep stuff there. So coming up to the 20th of November, we've got the new moon in Scorpio, and you'll see it's right at the bottom of the chart. In this particular chart, it's right at the end of Scorpio at 28 degrees. Now, if we think about some of the themes of Scorpio, it's ruled by Mars. It's also ruled by Pluto. Pluto has a real strong theme about power and being in control and being the end of the line. You know, like Pluto will take you to the end of a situation, almost to your wit's end. You know, so you get a real transformation. To me, Scorpio is a real life or death kind of energy. It really challenges you, and it's really in your face. You know, Mars makes it in your face. Mars is very confrontational, or can be. And so in the sign of Scorpio, I really think power, the sort of deeper inner psychological workings of your brain, facing your shadow is definitely a theme. I also think coming deeper into trust and loyalty. You know, Scorpio is going to test you so much more than, say, Virgo is going to test you. It's going to test you so much more than maybe Aquarius is going to test you, because Scorpio almost wants blood, sweat and tears. It's also quite a sexual sign, so it will get your body moving, your mind, your soul. It wants all of you, not just a fraction of you. So this new moon could really help you move forwards in a very holistic way, at a very deep level, in such a way that you're going to shift. You're going to be able to sow some new seeds to create something very passionate, very powerful, and something that's going to move your whole body. And so I will show you the chart of that later, and there'll be some even bigger things to put into this, for sure. We've got 12 trines in this month ahead, and trines are these 120 degree angles between these planets. And, you know, when you get three lots of trines, or 3 points, you get an equilateral triangle. Now, these trines are really showing where there's a flow, there's an ease. And all of these trines, or most of these trines, are turning up in water signs. So it's a flowing of emotion, a flowing of the psyche. This is fluidity. I think this is helping us to tune into intuition. I also think it is real soul work. And again, you know, if you are doing this shadow work that Scorpio really talks about, then you're, I think, starting to let go of some of these emotions that have held those patterns in place. We've also got 5 oppositions. Now, oppositions, like some of these, or most of these, are with Uranus. I think there's one with Chiron, and that's Venus and Chiron. But Uranus, you know, so he's a pretty important planet in this month ahead. He's going into Taurus, and he's also making these oppositions to Mercury, Mars, the Sun, and Venus. And so we're shifting in our personalities, in the things we say and think, in how we are wanting to act, in how we think of ourselves and see ourselves, and also in how we relate to people. So it does feel like we are really rebooting according to new information, new feelings. I've mentioned this Mercury and Uranus retrograde, so there is a separate video for that, and that we're going from Scorpio into Sagittarius. But other things that are ongoing, these are deeper patterns that have been going on a while. We've got this cradle, or a pair of underpants, or a roof, I guess. It depends how you might choose to see it. This is called a minor grand trine, so it's not big like these ones. It's a minor trine, but we've got Uranus and Pluto working together, and they are working beautifully with Saturn and Neptune. Now, this has been going on since the beginning of this year, and it's definitely going to be going on really until spring of next year, and then it will just be carried on with Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, because Saturn's going to move faster and out of it. But this is, I think, really special because we've got a very unusual sextile that's coming in, and it's going to be exact. And that would be the sextile between Uranus and Neptune. They're not normally exactly 60 degrees apart from each other, but they are going to be 60 degrees apart from each other. And this is very, very rare. And this is something I've seen this pattern come up when I've looked at other times when Uranus and Neptune are exactly in a sextile, that it's really showing where the overall kind of soul of humanity is shifting. And so again, this like talk of shifting, it really feels like there's this soul level shift, this kind of human personality shift. I don't know how to describe it. I think probably I'll do a different video about it, and I'll use some exact examples. But this is talking about something that's going to go beyond all the generations. It's hitting all of us. It's not just about millennials or Gen Alpha or anything like that. You know, it will be affecting all of us. We're all under the auspices of this. And it's far out. It's going to change our perception of how we see this planet. And yeah, this sextile is going to help bring it in. It can create quite a bit of disruption. I really do think the systems around us are all going to change. I really do. Then we've got this Jupiter, Chiron and Pluto T-square, which has been going on for a while now, and it's going to be going on until just before Christmas. And then, you know, Jupiter's retrograde and Chiron's retrograde are just pulling out of this aspect with Pluto. But for now, it's been going on for a long time, and it's going to reconstitute next year. But Jupiter in opposition to Pluto is really bringing up this sense of tension between what we're told to do and to accept as our reality, and what we're really feeling for ourselves. You know, Jupiter in Cancer, I think, is really reminding us of the old styles of families, our old traditions, our old cultural traditions, the traditions we grew up in, the kinds of connections we had in our little communities, our neighborhoods and things. And it's, I think, really encouraging us to reminisce. It's probably bringing up a feeling of homesickness for us. You know, if you're away, you might even feel that sort of like missing of people, even if actually you're really close by and you're not actually out of touch at all. It's that kind of longing, I think, you know, and maybe the remembrance that there are some things that we've let go of that actually could really serve us right now. And it's like our family identity, our community identity, and to take our cues from what's going on in our community. Like right now, it feels that authority and the forces that might govern us have just got further and further and further. They're out of our community. So when I mentioned earlier that banking has changed and there's fewer tellers and now there's just an automated service, that's because the people that are making the decisions are all sat in a call center somewhere, maybe not even in the country that you're from. And so like the sense of power and sovereignty that we have has slowly got further and further and further away from us. And this opposition is really showing us that. And it's also highlighting the pain involved in that. No doubt there's been some really good reasons why we wanted to like move away from maybe some of the energies that were really coming in and sown through the boomer generation, where you know, family was really important, but there was almost like a dictatorial seen and not heard energy that really went down. It got passed down from generation to generation. And, you know, every subsequent generation has been reacting to maybe like post-war family life, you know, and so the family life has been sort of really broken down. And I think we're really conscious of the pain of that right now. You know, Chiron shows us our pain, and our pain is in what we identify with. Chiron in Aries is really feeling it. We can really put our finger on it now. You know, we might be in a bit of a blame, shame and guilt fest right now because, you know, right now we know what we think is at the bottom of the pain we feel. You know, and there's pain as well, and pleasure associated with governments and outside sources. Maybe it feels safer to have an outside governing body, because if you can trust them, that's great. But what if you can't trust them? And what about the pain involved there? So I do think this is an ongoing pattern. And you might notice it in yourself, you know, again, not so much in the big world. The reason I mentioned the wider world is because Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, Pluto, and to some extent Jupiter, and Chiron for sure, they're all dictating to us how the world is changing. You know, they are less personalized planets. They are about the context of the world that we live in and that we're sharing and we're co-creating. So yeah, at a personal level, we may feel a lot of confusion as to how we get by in the world. You know, are we going to hand over all of our power to someone else to determine for us with their rules and regulations? Are we going to submit to a social contract of sorts? Or are we going to start to develop family again and install that, even though we felt pain from our family? Where are the values in it? Are there any? So I feel like we're at a crossroads. And, you know, like a crossroad, it does have a cross in it. And you can see there is a crossroad here. It's called a grand square. And as we start this month, Venus is at this other corner. But this grand square is, you know, maybe we can find a midpoint where we don't have to sell ourselves out and allow governments, and in fact, it's not even governments, it's these huge corporations that own our governments that maybe, you know, sell us out. Versus, are we going to manage ourselves? Do we have it in us? Can we remember? What can we learn from our forefathers? So there's a lot going on here, and it's taking us from past to the present and into the future, and a lot to consider. So I do think all of these themes are going to be playing behind the scenes. And of course, we've got this lovely grand trine going on and on and on and on. You know, Jupiter's here, Saturn and Neptune, you know, working with Jupiter is really heavenly. I really think we can start to move forwards with optimism and also start to create foundations. You know, Saturn and Jupiter, you know, one is constricting, the other is expanding, but they're working together quite harmoniously. And for, you know, this is a really harmonious feeling between Saturn and Jupiter, which we haven't had anything really good between them for a long time. So this feels exciting. We really can start to make some good new changes that are going to work for us at a personal level when all these personal planets come in. So there's a lot of context there. Let's have a quick look at the full moon and the new moon, and then I'm going to follow up with the actual sign-by-sign forecasts. So the full moon in Taurus then, what's really going on with this full moon? So you'll see the full moon's down here in opposition to the sun. But on the day of the full moon, we've got the final grand square between Chiron, Jupiter, Pluto, and Venus. Venus is about to move out of this grand square. She's on her way out. So that is definitely flavouring this full moon. We might be even more trying to find our comfort because we feel like orphans. You know, we feel like we've been cut off from our roots and we're trying to reclaim our roots. It seems very important to get roots right now. The grand water trine between Mars, Jupiter and Saturn is obviously taking place as well. And again, I think that is bringing us back to our roots. It's trying to help us flow in our emotions and maybe intuitively tune into where we've come from, our ancestry. And then we've got the sun and moon at this time in connections to the nodes. So we've got the sun in a trine to the north node and the moon in a trine to the south node. To me, this is our emotions from the past are helping our personalities and our identity move forwards in the future. So we might notice what we're feeling at the time of the full moon, but then it's always important to inform the identity. So whatever we're feeling, we might ask ourselves, how can I apply that? How can I make that work? What can I do with that feeling that can help me move forwards? And on the day of this full moon as well, we've got the Mars opposition Uranus exact. Now, this is the thing that I think is really catching my attention, you know, because a full moon, you know, with one of the planets in Scorpio, the sun in Scorpio, you know, and the moon in Taurus, these are quite stubborn signs. These are signs where people aren't going to give way. They're not going to move to give way. They're barreling forwards. And then Mars at 0 Sagittarius in opposition to Uranus is quite explosive. So I do think things are going to really build up around the 5th. So the 4th to the 8th to me is a huge, huge time. Then if we think about the new moon at the end of the month on the 20th, this chart looks so much better. It's got a lot less red and a lot more blue. The blue just shows where there's a lot more ease and flow. So on the day of this new moon, you can see here that the sun and the moon are coming together at 28 degrees. You've also got Mercury retrograde in this new moon. That means we've got the cazimi, the Mercury cazimi. So to me, this 28 degree point in Scorpio is super strong. And it just so happens to be working almost exactly in a trine with Neptune, which is really enhancing sort of intuition and that sense of just knowing, just absolutely feeling it. It's also very collective. It's like we have a collective understanding that just seems to be within us. And the last point is this new moon is in opposition to Uranus. And so not only have we got this feeling of creating something new with purpose and power and the flow of the emotions, but it's tapping into this Uranus energy at 29 degrees in the sign of Taurus. You know, we might need to change how we feel about security. There might be some concession that we make to be able to create the thing we're wanting to birth. So for instance, if you've got like a business idea, or if you've got an idea as to where you want to move, or wherever it's showing up for you this full moon, the fact that it's in opposition to Uranus to me is suggesting that to be able to move forwards, you almost have to break off from something, or try to integrate how you can, I don't know, maybe blend two parts of yourself. Maybe, you know, the side of you that needs freedom and the side of you that is absolutely committed to achieving what it is you want to achieve. So I think this new moon is really strong, and I think it's a very interesting and important day in this month ahead. So I hope that was helpful in sowing the seeds for the patterns in November for the month ahead. Of course, what that means now is this is where I get to look at each ascendant sign by sign, from Aries right the way through to Pisces, and give you a sense of what's really good about these shifts coming up and how it's going to help you. So stick around. Hey there, Aries ascendant. So in looking at November, what I've done is I've written down, you know, the whole list of all the different things that I think are really shifting the energy in this month ahead, and I've mapped them out over a kind of pseudo birth chart, you know, a whole sign Western tropical chart model to try and help you understand what's going on. Now, if when you look at your first house, you've also got Taurus and Aries in the first house, then it's also important to listen to the Taurus forecast as well. But, you know, really where I want to start is how the full moon and the new moon are shaping you in this month ahead, and also the impact that the Mercury movements are going to be having, because Mercury is going to start the retrograde on the 9th at 6 degrees in the sign of Sagittarius, and work back to 20 degrees in Scorpio on the 29th. And then there's also a Mercury cazimi in there as well, in a conjunction with this new moon. So I really think, you know, the 20th is going to be quite a big day. The 19th, 20th, and the 19th to 22nd feels really quite special. There's the Sun, Moon, and Mercury retrograde all coming together at the same point in Scorpio. So how does this relate to you? That's the most important thing. Well, first of all, if we consider Mars is your ruling planet. Mars is getting it all going on the 4th, and he's moving from Scorpio into the sign of Sagittarius, which is in the 9th house. And that's really favoring you taking action that is curious, excited, adventurous, and really quite courageous in views and in self-expression. The 9th house is where we liberate ourselves, where we free ourselves up. And so Mars coming into Sagittarius is, I think, an invitation for you to lighten up, be a lot more gung-ho, to take some risks. I'm not, suggesting doing anything daft or silly, but, to kind of release some of the control that you have put yourself under. To me, this is like kicking off a pair of tight shoes at the end of the day, only you're actually deciding not to even wear shoes at all. You're deciding to go barefoot. To me, this is anything that feels tight, controlling, that's minimizing your self-expression. It's time to let that go. So from the 4th onwards, when Mars, your ruling planet, goes into the sign of Sagittarius, it's going to be fun. Now, I remember the last time Mars went into my 9th house, and, the 9th house has a lot to do with study and also a lot to do with knowledge. And, it's a time when we waken up and get really, really curious about all the things that we're interested in. And so it really wouldn't surprise me if during this month ahead, with Mars just going into the 9th house, that you're signing up for a class, you're buying learning online, you're downloading books, you're buying books, you're going to talks and things like that, or booking a holiday because, the need to express is really strong. So that's really setting us up on a really great trajectory. This is really going to move you forwards beautifully. Then the next day, we've got the full moon in Taurus, and that's emphasizing any dramas that you've got about your self-worth and your value. So anywhere where you feel like you don't deserve, you don't belong. But it's also where you might be creating drama about your money. It's important not to take it too seriously because, these full moons are gone in a blink of an eye. You really feel it the day before and the day after. So, when Mars is moving into the 9th house, it's already starting to come in, and, we seem to be a lot more emotional. And those emotions do seem to be around what you've achieved in terms of financials, in terms of how much comfort and security you might enjoy. And of course, around the time of the full moon, we often don't realize all the different things we've got, and we can get quite melodramatic and quite, I think it's important that you don't end up blaming yourself or judging yourself too much. It's really important to stay as light and as positive as possible. With a full moon, there's always the sun in opposition, and the sun in opposition is going to be in the sign of Scorpio in your 8th house. And this is a place where we often take the words of others really seriously. So, we might have it echoing in our minds, things our parents have said to us in the past about how successful they thought we might be. And so it's really important that you're choosy as to whose opinion of you you're choosing to play. And if you can recognize the words and recognize the persona of where you're getting this information from, it gives you a bit more flexibility to say, do you know what, I don't need to hear from you right now. If you could take your own wise counsel and, if you start getting a difficult feeling to process, you say, hang on a second, who does this belong to? Where is this coming from? Whose judgment of this have I taken on as my own self-judgment, as my own marker of where I should be? If you can recognize that, I think it's going to be a lot easier. So if you start to feel like that coming up to this full moon, it's important to do what you can to release it as soon as possible, or to let it go, or maybe just get somebody close by to listen to you, and to reassure you that you're really not like that. The moon's very, very sensitive here, especially in the sign of, especially in a full moon position. Now, the next day, Venus is going into the sign of Scorpio. Now, Scorpio is a kind of fellow Mars-ruled sign, and so it's going to be interesting having Venus coming here. Venus does rule your money house, and she also rules your relationships. So you might find that you're starting to get a little bit, not territorial, but maybe a little bit, maybe you're keeping an eye on your money and also keeping an eye on the people close to you. You're wanting to stay as close as possible. It's often a time when we worry about things leaving us. You know, Venus in the sign of Scorpio can get a little bit, especially in the 8th house, can get a little bit nervous. You know, can I trust this person? Can I trust that someone loves me or likes me enough? It can bring out some of the crazies in us, you know, like, you know, Venus in the sign of Scorpio is strong, really strong emotions and a strong need to relate to people. And if they're not matching how you are expecting them to relate to you, it might bring up some questions, you know. And so again, you might be worried that the money's going to leave you. You might be worried that you're trying to build intimacy with your partner and it feels like it's falling on deaf ears. Again, I would say, you know, Venus's journey through the sign of Scorpio is actually really fast. She's going to be into Sagittarius at the end of this. And so as I see this, Venus is really taking you on a whirlwind of how to go deeper into trust quite quickly. During this time, she is also going to go into an opposition with Uranus, and she's also going to go into a grand trine with Jupiter and also Saturn and Neptune. And so the way I'm seeing this play out is, you know, Venus is actually softening you up. You know, all these deep emotions and concerns as to whether people can be trusted or not and whether you're good enough. They're really softening you up. They're really kind of opening you up a lot more. So some of the hard armor is coming off. And then as, you know, Venus goes into opposition with Uranus just before the 30th, what you might find is you're making a bit of a breakthrough. It feels like you're ready to love on a much freer term and to not need quite so much. You know, you might not need someone to be proving their love to you all the time. It feels like you're ending this month feeling a lot more liberated and a lot freer to be yourself and a lot happier being yourself as well. Uranus going back into Taurus. I've spoken a little bit about this earlier in the video, but I do think it's likely to bring up a review point of how you're managing your money. And that's an ongoing review until April of next year. And then we're coming up to this very, very busy time. So, you know, Mercury is moving in a retrograde from the 9th house and back into the 8th. To me, this is an indication that some of your more recent views, the ones that are taking you further and further away from the people that you might know, i.e., you know, like when you're growing up, there's usually a context that you're raised in. I think in recent times, your views, your beliefs, your spirituality, for instance, has transformed, you know, in such a way that people might not recognize where your thoughts have come from. They're presenting as quite different. And so as Mercury is going retrograde, you're bringing some of those thoughts back down to earth. It feels like you're double checking some of your more recent assumptions. And then as they're coming, as Mercury's coming back into the 8th house, you're thinking about your new knowledge through the guise of blame, shame, guilt and anger, and how that might work with your family or how that might not work with your family. To me, it's almost like your recent learning is being put through the lens of childhood healing. You know, this time of year brings out a lot of shadow work. And given that you've got all these Scorpio placements in the 8th house, which is traditionally a real Scorpio house, I think there's quite a bit of shadow work going on. But after the new moon, when there's a Cazimi on the 20th, to me, it feels like there's this real new burst of insight. There's this feeling of like a fresh start, like a fresh psychological start, as if something has just clicked into place just in time for this new moon and just in time for the sun to go into Sagittarius. So from start to finish, it feels like you're, you know, the depth of or the strength of the full moon has shocked you a little bit and made you feel a little less stable. And then you've really gone through some deep psychological considerations so that by the end of this period of time, not only are you wanting to take action and experiment and learn and be curious in the world, but you're also wanting to be really curious and free and liberated a lot more with your relationships. So I think you're going to really lighten up and feel really quite good by the end of this. So I hope those little pointers have been helpful to you, Aries. Lots and lots of love to you. Have a great November. Bye for now. Hey there, Taurus. So these are the movements of all of these. I've plotted them in this big chart. And the thing that really strikes me about this forecast for the next month ahead, and this, I mean, this is obviously an overview. I can't go into like great depth because obviously it's 30 days and lots of different situations coming up each day. But what really strikes me is the position of the full moon, which is in your first house, which is a very, very sensitive place to have a full moon. And also the position of the new moon on the 20th, which is in the sign of Scorpio. And also where the Mercury Retrograde starts here at 6 degrees in the sign of Sagittarius. And it moves back into Scorpio. And then on the 29th, it starts to move forwards again. Now, the other thing that really strikes me is Venus. Venus is your ruling planet. As we start this, she's just going into, the sign of Scorpio just 1 week in on the 6th. And then by the end of the month, she's going into the sign of Sagittarius here. And so to me, with your ruling planet, Venus, being in the 7th house and then into the 8th, I think these two houses are really about relationships. You know, the 7th house is really a lot about partners and how you're seeing partners and the real balance between you versus your partner. The full moon, I think, is really bringing up a lot of ideas about who you really are and all the things that you're getting sensitive about around the time of the full moon on the 5th. All the things that seem a little bit overwhelming are really showing you what you're really made of, you know, what's really important to you. You'll really see it sort of mirrored back to you. And, you know, this is a time when it's not easy to be very rational. You know, a full moon in the first house, it can really bring up some associated pain. You might even find, if you're quite sensitive, that you feel things in your body. So it's important that you do what you can leading up to the 5th. Really from the 4th, you know, I always think the day before the full moon and then the day after, they're really, really sensitive times. So the more you can do to relax and alleviate overwhelm as it might build up, I think the better off you'll be. But the full moon and the new moon across the 1st and the 7th house, it's one of those transforming months. So November just feels really transforming, like you're about to move forwards a lot in your relationships. And it starts with this personal learning that you're going through around the 5th. Feels like a lot of things come up, a lot of home truths. And, you know, the great thing about this is really you doing it to yourself. This is really your own process that you're going through. Now, the days between the 4th and the 9th just seem really quite intense. We've got Mars going into the sign of Sagittarius, which is your 8th house, followed by this full moon, followed by Venus going into the sign, your ruling planet going into the sign of Scorpio, followed by Uranus coming into your first house. That's another first house thing. And then finally, Mercury going retrograde from Sagittarius. So this is an intense shift, and I just want to pace you through it a little bit. Mars going into the 8th house. The 8th house is very much about transformation. It's very psychological. It's quite a sexy house. And it also often brings up issues to do with managing other people's money and assets. You know, people that you might be in a relationship with. It might be your parents. Not just that, but you get very aware of what other people are thinking about you. I always think of the 8th house as a place of the shadow. I often also think of it as a place where blame, shame, guilt and anger are passed down to you, almost like thrown at you. Sometimes there are guilt throwers and guilt catchers. And so it's a time when you become very aware of the pain or the cost that you're carrying on your shoulders, or, you know, like what you're wearing to protect yourself from everything, you know, it's coming in. To me, the awareness of the discomfort that you feel in yourself and the discomfort that you might feel in comparison to people close to you is quite overwhelming. And with Mars coming in here, but then Mercury retrograding through here and back into the relationships area, to me, this is an indication that you're really ready to release a lot of stuff, stuff that's been almost taking up too much space in your real sort of private mind. So, you know, you might find that you've actually got quite a few persistent thoughts that might not actually belong to you at all. They might just be things that other people have installed in your brain. I mean, I don't mean that they've done anything manipulative necessarily to get inside your brain, but, you know, we're really sensitive when we're growing up. And, you know, Taurus being ruled by Venus, they're so sensitive to how people find them. And, you know, I think some of the things that you might have taken to heart are of greater importance this month, because you realise finally whether they really are important or not. And actually, I think this full moon followed by Mercury going retrograde is showing you where you've carried beliefs about yourself that really aren't true. And also, they're not as big of a deal as you might think. Or the person that has kind of helped you see their perspective, you might realise that you just don't respect them anymore. So to me, this is a real sort of turnaround time. And as Mercury is going retrograde back into the 7th house of partners, to me, it feels like the stuff you've been carrying and that's been living in your head rent free, you're getting ready just to hand it back, or to say, you know, I don't need this anymore, because here I am with you right now. And, you know, I don't need to have things badly explained. I don't need manipulation. I just need a straightforward sense of partnering, you know. As Mercury's coming back into the 7th house, it's like all these shadows are brought to the surface so you can see them. So the light of day comes in and then there are no shadows anymore. To me, this is getting ready to cure and let go of old beliefs. So it's really, really strong. It feels like almost like a psychic medicine, you know, the planetary picture right now. As Uranus comes back into Taurus, you might be reminded of some of the changes you've gone through since 2018. Uranus in your first house will have brought up a freakier version of you, you know, this part of you that's more ready for change. You know, Taurians don't like to single themselves out too much as being that different. And so you might find that desire to be a little unconventional, a little eccentric, a little bit individual becomes stronger around, you know, the 8th and beyond. This is going to persist into April of next year. And then the 19th and 20th, I think, is really, really big. It's in your 7th house. To me, this is an invitation to a breakthrough about your relationships. Mercury comes back in here, so it's retrograding. Mercury connects with the sun and the moon. There's a cazimi, which is a time when our thinking is illuminated, our communication is illuminated and highlighted. It's definitely a time of breakthrough or potential breakthrough. And, you know, with a new moon energy, I think there's a much bigger possibility for you to form a relationship based on real trust and this kind of surrender to the fact that you are okay, and that you're more than enough. I think you're resetting your expectations for relationships in a very powerful way. And then as we're coming into the last part of the week, the sun's moving into Sagittarius, Mercury starts to go direct, and then Venus comes into Sagittarius. Now, Sagittarius for you is really highlighting the 8th house, and this is quite a psychological house. It is a place where things can get a bit hidden, but it's also a place where we face ourselves a little bit more, and also a place where we work things through. So for instance, if you found yourself in recent times, in recent years, having patterns where you get so far but you don't push beyond it, I think the 8th house is a place that gives you a rite of passage. And so I actually think you know, after this new moon, as the sun goes into Sagittarius and then Venus comes into Sagittarius, you've got a real chance to push beyond one of those limits that you've set yourself. And it might just be that relationship limit. So I'm going to leave that there for you, Taurus. I hope that's helpful in navigating the month ahead. Have a fabulous month ahead and catch you real soon. Bye for now. Hey there, Gemini. This is my little depiction of what I think is going on in November. I've listed here on the left-hand side a lot of detail about where the planets are moving, when the full and new moon are and where they're taking place. And then I've noted the big movements of Mercury. And of course, Mercury is your ruling planet. So as you can see, when it's plotted out on the chart, there's this really strong area here between the 6th and the 7th house, between the sign of Scorpio and Sagittarius. And I should just say, this is a whole sign Western tropical model. If when you look at your first house, you've got Gemini in, that's absolutely perfect. But if when you look at your first house in your birth chart, if you've got it in front of you, if you've got Gemini and Cancer in it, then you could almost listen to Cancer. Cancer would also give you some really good clues and tips for this month ahead. So anyway, what's this part of your chart all about? So I guess if we start with the 6th house, the 6th house where Scorpio is a place where we really get to the nuts and bolts of things. You know, we're really looking at our routines, how we manage our money, how we manage our energy, our body, our home, how great we are at work and how productive we are, and also our health. And so it's quite a workhorse part of the chart. And so for the first part of November, when we've got Venus in here, when we've got Mercury retrograding in here and the sun is in here up until the 22nd, you'll probably find that you're working a lot on getting things done. It feels really important to get things organized. And so the stories of your life, like what's holding it together, are going to become very, very real and really strong. It feels like, when you look at your routine and where you have to be on this day and where you have to be on that day, it's almost determining the story of who you are. And at some level, that's really helpful because it gives you the framework to move forwards. And at an unconscious level, I think it might bring up this feeling of, is that all there is? You know, I'm incredibly busy. I'm managing this diary. You know, I'm getting everything done or not. But where's the magic? You know, the 6th house isn't necessarily a place that's very magical. It can be very sort of bosh, 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 bosh. You know, like I do this, then I do that. And it's like a conveyor belt sometimes. And so here's why I think the full moon is potentially a bit shocking. You know, the full moon in the 12th house is really awakening your inner mind, your imagination and your intuition. And I think it's really showing you where it's all made up. You know, from the perspective of the full moon in the 12th, and, you know, with a full moon, there's always a sun exactly in opposition. You might find that the sun's drive to have you get out of bed on time, you know, polish your shoes before work or whatever it is that you're doing, like driving to work and stuff and managing all your bills. You're the sun that is driving this in your life. It feels like, oh my God, this personality, this persona that I've created for myself, this way of being just doesn't feel like me. And at the time of the full moon, you're really aware of it. There's this part of you just kind of yearns to be away from it all and to feel almost like you're in one of those Kate Bush music videos with your hair all wispy and your skirt flying around in the wind. You know, it's this kind of real intuitive, grounded person that doesn't have time and money as contributing factors. There's this urge to just be. Now, I don't know what day the 5th is on. In fact, I'm just going to check. Hang on one sec. Okay, I've just checked. The 5th is on Wednesday. So on the 5th on Wednesday, you know, I mean, a lot of people go to work on a Wednesday, but if you can carve out some time for yourself to just be wild, to be quiet, to be observing, to be creative, to be absent, you know, to kind of be away from the stories. I really feel the need for you to do something that feels like a ceremony to yourself, you know, to recognize that you are a wonder, you are an individual, that you are really special, you're a soul in a body. Anything that you can do to remind yourself of the magic of life, I think is really important. And I think when you're doing that, it's going to give you a real sense of where you want to create an even better life for yourself. And of course, the new moon in Scorpio on the 20th in your 6th house is giving you, I think, the ingredients to create a new start that could be very, very beneficial. So I really think that, you know, the wildness in you is the thing that's going to be determining the newness and the freshness in you moving forwards. And maybe how to pick a better story for yourself. So if you find that you're moaning about your own story and that you're, I mean, you can make yourself your own hero, but you might make yourself your own victim. I don't know how you're going to read your story about yourself. But to me, this is about self-authorship. It's about what's the story you're going to be telling about yourself over, you know, the course of November that's going to influence how you reset yourself with this lovely new moon in Scorpio. Now, this new moon is very, very strong because on that particular day, Mercury Retrograde has also come into a conjunction with the new moon. It's causing what's known as a Mercury cazimi, where we get a potential flash of insight, really strong insight. Our brain is so strong at that time. So this new moon is a reset to help you recolor your life in a whole new way. I think this is rather great. Now, Uranus, which has been in your 1st house since the 7th of July, is also going to be moving back into your 12th house. Now, it was in your 12th house from 2018 right the way through to the 7th of July this year. And no doubt it's brought up a much deeper sense of intuition and a kind of witchiness, you know, this kind of knowing, this deep sense of information just popping right in your brain, like you've got this automatic channel going on. And so I think the full moon in Taurus is reminding you of it. So by the 8th, when Uranus comes back into your 12th house, I think it's awakening the inner intuitive archetype for you. It's almost gone back in to say, hang on a second, you've forgotten. That needs to come with you into the daylight. It's almost asking you to bring your intuition much more forwards so it's clear to understand. Now, on that note, I did do a video about Uranus and Mercury in their oppositions. There are going to be 3 oppositions. You can see it in, you know, on my channel on YouTube. But this opposition is taking place, you know, from your 1st and 7th houses and into your 6th and 12th houses. To me, I really want to double down on what I said about authorship. This is really about you redesigning your life, but bringing the intuition center stage, front and center stage, so that you're no longer letting the Mercury function, which can be very rational and very timed and measured. All of that, to me, it feels like the measurement is slowly wearing you down and making you forget that you're unique and making you forget that you're a human. And so this is a very humanizing and awakening time for you. November's going to be really quite instrumental in helping you feel very, very differently. As we come to the end of this month with the Sun going into Sagittarius and then Venus going into Sagittarius, and the fact that we've also got Mars in Sagittarius, there's a lot of emphasis on the 7th house. If you're single, this is a fantastic time for you to feel a lot more connected to other people, to feel like you want to spend time with people, to share things with people, to be active and kind of sexy with people. This could be a really great time for you to meet somebody very, very special. And of course, all of that, I think, is really coming from you including the fullness of you in your personality. So it's no longer about the Gemini wisecracks and the fact that you can go from one thing to another and really shine like a little butterfly flying around all these lovely little flowers and things. The Gemini mind is lovely. I love how interested you are in so many things. But there's a new depth coming forwards, and it's that intuitive energy that's being added in. And I think that's the thing that's really enabling your relationships to come alive. So I'm going to leave that there, Gemini. Have a fabulous November and hopefully catch up with you all soon. Bye for now. Hey there, Cancer Ascendant. So this is your Ascendant forecast. It's a whole sign Western tropical model to explore the month ahead and what benefits there might be to it, what's really working in your favour. I've listed all the most important points I think of this month ahead, including all of the planets that are changing signs, and also Mercury. You'll see here, he goes retrograde at 6 degrees in the sign of Sagittarius, and he goes all the way back to when he goes direct at 20 degrees, I should say Scorpio, 20 degrees Scorpio on the 29th. Now, Mercury is, when he's going back, Mercury is going to retrograde into the sign of Scorpio. And then on the 20th, he's also in a Kazemi position, i.e. he's really, really strong. And he's in an exact conjunction with the moon and the sun at the same time at 28 degrees in the sign of Scorpio. So we've got the new moon here. We've also got the full moon here on the 5th, which I think are really giving you a sense of what you're building to and then what you're releasing. And, you know, this Mercury retrograde really needs to be understood at a much deeper level. So I think they're where I'm going to focus on. If when you look at your first house, you've got Cancer and also Leo, then it's really important that you listen to Leo as well, because that will give you a really good sense of what's coming up for you. So where to start? Okay, well, the first thing that I think this really helps you to see is there's a lot going on down here from the 5th house and into the 6th house. Now, the 5th house is about everything that is lifting you up, and everything that's matching your ideas of what feels passionate, what feels creative, what feels like it's bringing you joy. The 5th house is also a place where we might conceive children or birth children. It's also where we might be conceiving and birthing of plans. It's also, if you're single, really helpful place to meet somebody. But if you're in an existing relationship, it's also a time when we might rekindle and refresh our relationships. So there is definitely a theme of tuning into passion. And also tuning into love and everything that nourishes you and feels good. Definitely there's a theme of, using your creativity to birth something, to like really bring something to the fore. So if there's something that you're really excited about, like a hobby or something that you really want to do more of, this is a time when you can really do that. Now, we've got Venus going into Scorpio on the 6th. In fact, this period of time here from the 4th to the 9th is a really, really busy time. Let me pace this out. So it starts off with Mars coming from this house, going into the sign of Sagittarius, which is where all the energies are heading at the end of the month. So it starts off in this place of passion. And then by the 22nd, there's a real strong movement into the 6th house where you're looking to get a lot more organized. I think, going through the 5th house earlier in the month, this is often a time when we are so creative that we're creating a bigger problem for ourselves. We really start creating things, initiating new projects. We start lots of little things. Sometimes there's a lot of loose ends. And then as the planets are moving into the 6th house, we then have the job of managing it. And we're also thinking, okay, well, what's really passionate and also what feels really good for us, we need to now fit it into our life. So, the beginning of this month is a lot more kind of throwing lots of things into the mix and really enjoying the whole process. And the second and the latter part of November is where you're starting to get very hopeful about what you're doing, and now you're starting to fit it into your day-to-day, your diary, your habits, and your routine. Now, So yeah, it gets starting with Mars going into Sagittarius. You know, to me, that's an energetic shift. It's really asking you to take action about the things that you've recently been enjoying. It's really wanting to do things and do them more often. Mars coming into this part of your chart is also, I think, highlighting that it's time to wake up and get a lot more organized. It's almost like you're preparing for something, almost like it feels like if I don't prepare, if I'm not slightly on my guard, if I haven't quite worked everything out, I might miss my opportunity. So it's almost like, I think, a coiled spring. You know, Mars is really ready to go and to take action. And so you might feel quite direct. You might feel very energetic. If you are a highly energetic person, by the way, having Mars going into the 6th house can make you overdo things. And so if that is something that you suffer with, I would just, you know, advise you not to take on more than you can chew. If you absolutely know this is your tendency, just be consciously aware of it. So you do what you can handle and you do what you can absolutely comfortably achieve. See, one of the things with Cancer rising is you're ruled by the moon. And, you know, the moon is changing face all the time. You know, the moon is moving from new moon to full moon and back to new moon. All the time there's a slightly different feeling. And so, you know, when Mars comes into the 6th house after having been very creatively inspired before, you're often so full of ideas and the confidence to get things moving. And you could set off loads of different plates spinning in different directions, you know. And the thing with the moon is it's great when you're up, but if all of a sudden your mood suddenly drops, then you've got a load of plates spinning and you lack the energy to be able to keep them all going. So I really do think that Mars going into the Sagittarius, whilst it's quite experimental, quite playful, and quite pioneering, you also want to be very discerning about what you're carrying on with, because, you know, if you really do relate to my comment about, you know, your energetic awareness of somehow your energy just flakes out, it disappears on you, then you'll know exactly what I mean. It's something to watch out for. The full moon is on the 5th. Now, I always think with the full moon, you really are feeling it the day before and the day after. So the 4th, 5th, 6th just feels so intense. But the 5th, on the 5th, and it's like, remember the 5th of November, this full moon in Taurus is in your 11th house. Now, this could actually be quite fun. You know, the 11th house is a place of friendships. And it's a place of friendships who are also very well connected. You know, this is a place where your life can expand quite quickly because you meet friends of friends of friends. And so the moon here is really bringing out the social side in you. With a full moon, the sun is always in opposition. So the sun is in the 5th house, which is really quite guarding what it's creating. So it feels like there's a little bit of a tension. You know, on the one hand, you're enjoying your space, you're enjoying your creativity, and that acknowledgement that you're doing something that you feel passionate about. And yet there's this tension, this feeling of, oh my God, I'm getting all these invitations. I'm getting people wanting to connect with me, create with me. And again, you know, I was talking about those plates spinning. You might feel very torn because how can you achieve all of it? So it's worth bearing that in mind around the time of the full moon, because you might feel sort of overstimulated, over-challenged. So again, if you can thin things out in preparation for that, that'd be very helpful. Now on the 6th, the day after the full moon, Venus is heading into Scorpio. And, you know, Venus going into the 5th house is helpful. Again, if you're single, really helpful. You know, and she's quite sort of fertile in the sign of Scorpio in the 5th house. And so there's this kind of sensuousness that's coming in that feels really quite delightful. You know, if you're in a new relationship, if you're in an existing relationship, this can be a highly sexual time for you. So enjoy it, you know, really make the most of it. And then, you know, in the whole kind of energetics of this, we've also got Uranus backing from Gemini and back into the 11th house. Now, the feeling that I was describing with this full moon about like lots of friends and the tension of how do I keep honouring my friends whilst also honouring myself, Uranus coming back in here on the 8th is also going to create a lot more drama and a lot more excitement with friends. Maybe there's some like new people that you're ready to meet that could absolutely change your life. It could be business people, it could be people that might know your next partner, for instance. And so I think, you know, as this is coming in, it's wise to really tune in to your intuition. Obviously, with Cancer rising, you've got amazing intuition. It's worth tuning into every social opportunity while Uranus is there, because, you know, there may well be some unfinished business, some exciting stuff. However, Uranus is also known as being a bit shocking. And so you might find that there are people around you that are almost like too dramatic, that might actually not help your life, but might hinder it. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with having all these invitations, but use your discernment as much as possible to see which ones are going to help you. One of the reasons I say that is because during this time, we have got a load of oppositions to Uranus. You know, we've got, obviously, Mars has already been in an opposition to Uranus. We've also got Mercury that is currently in an opposition to Uranus. And later on, you know, we're also going to get the Sun go over this point, and also Venus. And so we really want to watch Uranus. You know, it could really bring in some dramatic energies from your friends and your friendships and your friendship groups that might shock you and everything that you're about. I mean, again, it could be shocking to get you to the next level. It could be exciting, but again, I just recommend that you tune into that as much as you can. You see, with Mercury going retrograde from your 6th house in Sagittarius and back into Scorpio, making this amazing Mercury cazimi on the 20th, and also the new moon, there's this, I think, real desire in you to not be quite so swayed by other people. It feels like you're on the verge of a really personal birthing, you know, something that you've really wanted to do for a long time, and maybe you've not been able to see the clear vision, you've not been able to completely settle into it. And now when people are all trying to clamour to get your attention, it actually feels like you're stepping back into your creativity again. All of a sudden you can see how it might look. It's almost like a homecoming. Similarly, if you've got children that maybe you've been a bit estranged from, you might find during this time, all of a sudden, everything is coming back to you. And again, it's not making you want to go out into the world necessarily, or go on a million different social trips. It just feels actually like this is a time to nourish your creative vision and to enjoy it loads. You know, so yeah, the 4th to the 9th, I think, is really setting the scene that you're raring to go. There's lots of social demands on you, and yet there's this delicious passion that's developing in you. And also, you're ready to look at things from a new perspective with Mercury going retrograde. See, Mercury rules your 3rd house to do with your community, and also the 12th house to do with your unconscious mind. So when Mercury is going retrograde, he's really, you know, affecting your 3rd house, and in there you will have a load of friends and the people you hang out with, and everything that you've known about your childhood, you know, and the sort of environment that you've grown up in. It's almost like you're rethinking the narrative. You're rethinking all the ideas you grew up with as to what it might be like to be an adult. And so right now, I think you're rethinking, it's changing the way you process things in your mind, like the 12th house, but you're rethinking your direction. And maybe in doing that, you need to be cautious around the people around you so that you can develop your ideas quietly before everyone else comes in and interferes, because actually that's what happens a lot. You know, people, you might share an idea with somebody and then they say, well, that's good. However, blah, 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 blah. And so sometimes you can be really put off your sacred journey. So I think the scene is set and you're raring to go, but it's more of an inward journey that you're wanting to, get involved in. From the 19th, when Mercury goes back into Scorpio, we've got the 19th to the 22nd, which feels like another sort of nexus point. So we've got like the 4th to the 9th, really busy, then the 19th to the 22nd. So, you know, Mercury's going backwards into Scorpio. You're a lot more intuitive again and a lot more private, a lot more personal. As the Mercury Cazimi comes in and the new moon in Scorpio is coming in, to me, this is a time to ask yourself, what thing am I so passionate about that I want to restart, relaunch, or commit myself to? And so to me, this is the creation or the seed point of a real personal desire. So yeah, it would be really great if you could get some time to yourself around there. You know, if your personal desire is actually to conceive a child or to enjoy spending time with your new partner, then yeah, don't be on your own. I mean, this is really helpful energy for you in a new relationship, but I don't really see you wanting to be super social. This is a time that's much more aligned to your personal goals rather than the goals that you might share with people in general. And then from the 22nd, when the sun goes into the sign of Sagittarius, we've already got Mars in Sagittarius. Soon Venus is also going to come into Sagittarius. The energy seems to turn more outwards. So from the 22nd, it just feels like you're ready for action. You've got a clearer vision. You're quite busy. Maybe the run up to, you know, obviously it's a month from Christmas by this point almost. And it just feels like the pace is a lot more competitive. It also feels like a time when you're really quite confident and you know what you're doing. Towards the last 2 days, Mercury goes direct, and then Venus by this point is just moving into the sign of Sagittarius. So I think from the start of this, where you're really in your personal journey, to the end of this, you're feeling a lot more motivated. So it looks to me like this month is like a vision quest. And so I think that's where I'm going to leave this, Cancer. I hope that's helpful for you. To me, it feels like such a strong time for you. Have a great one. Lots of love. Bye for now. Hey there, Leo. So this is your ascendant forecast for the month of November. Now, if when you look at your birth chart, you've got Leo in the first house, and this is the forecast for you. But if you've got Leo and Virgo, then I recommend you also listen to Virgo as well. These are the most important points as I see them over the next month ahead. And each of these dots is plotted on this map. And what I like about this picture is it gives you this clear view as to what part of your chart is more lit up in this month ahead, and that would be the 4th house going into the 5th house. So at the start of this month, we got Mars just heading into Sagittarius. We got Venus going into Scorpio. We got Uranus going into Taurus. He's retrograding back into Taurus. We've also got this full moon on the 5th. And so what I'm going to do is break this down in these little time chunks. I think the 4th to the 9th is a very, very busy time. And then I think the 19th to the 22nd is another really busy time. And then the last couple of days I'll also talk about. So let's start at the beginning then. As you can see here, we've got the 4th and the 5th house highlighted. And to me, this is really showing that the first part of this month, and in fact, until about the 22nd, a lot of the energy here is really about the Scorpio energy. And as you can see in this part of the chart, it's the 4th house. The 4th house is about home. It's about comfort. It's a very, very private part of your chart. It's also about the family. It also rules, you know, your parents and your interactions with your parents. And if you are a parent, your interactions with your children. It can also show up some of your ancient programming. Some of your behaviours, I think, really get captured in the 4th house. And so you might find that this month feels a little bit private, as if you're investing a lot more back into the home. You know, I always think of this time of year as we're coming into where I am in my time zone. We're in autumn. You know, this is a time when we're starting to heat up our homes a little bit more. This is a time when we're trying to get cosy. and this is a time when you might put your heating on and put an extra duvet on your bed at night, and just kind of pull people closer to you. And so that's what I'm really seeing as the vision for you in this month ahead, Leo. It feels like after a summer of running around and doing this, that and the other, it feels like now it's time to pull the people that you love even closer to you and get to know people again. So it's not a time to be rushing around necessarily, but it's a time to really feel into your relationships. Now, the other thing, where this energy is moving to after that is the 5th house. And the 5th house is a place of passion and joy and love. It's also a place of children and conception. And I always think of it as a place where, this is our stability. Wherever we feel stable, once we feel stable and safe, we start to express ourselves and we start to think about what we want to build. And so, according to how comfortable and stable you are in this first bit, I think that's going to determine how you hit the Sagittarius season that's starting on the 22nd. I think if you rest and recuperate and enjoy your family loads during this time, I really feel that from the 22nd, you will be inspired and you'll know what you're really passionate about. You'll know what lifts you up and what you're going to focus your time on. So this is a quiet, private time, but also a deeply creative time. Now, on the 4th, and I always think with a full moon, we start to feel it a couple of days before, but it's essentially like the 4th, the 5th, the 6th just seem to be high impact days. Now, this 5th, on the 5th, we've got the full moon in Taurus. This is actually in your 10th house, which is a really public part of the chart to be having a full moon. Now, every year we'll have one full moon, sometimes 2 tops. But we'll have a full moon in our 10th house. And these full moons, are great if you're wanting to get exposure. They're really fabulous. Like if you've been working hard towards your career to get noticed, this full moon can really, show you where you're getting exposed. It can be helpful. However, it can also be very unhelpful if you're feeling highly emotional, highly charged, and if you're out in public around the time of the full moon. One thing that, and I've learned hard lessons myself, is like going out and hitting it hard, with the booze on the day of a full moon, especially if it's in your 10th. The chances of making a twat of yourself in front of colleagues and stuff. This is a time when if you've got something emotional going on, you really don't want to go out partying with the people that you're emotional about. So some caution is advised around this. Now, full moons are seen as being these energies that are quite, they are about birthing. The new moon is about the conception. And the full moon is like that big pregnant belly where all of a sudden that birthing comes out. And so you might be feeling very, very creative in terms of your career. Wouldn't be surprised if that was the case at all. So it can be also very helpful to sort of generate your ideas externally. Though after this, your energy is really back in the home. And where you can keep things nice and safe and cozy. So there does feel a bit of a divide between home and away, home in the safety with your family, and then out in the real world where it can get cold, it can get a bit ugly, where you don't feel quite so safe. But like I say, there's ideas and there's inspiration there, So from the 6th, Venus is going into the 4th house. This is lovely. This is seen as a beautiful time for family. And then you've got the 8th. On the 8th, you've got Uranus backing back into Taurus. Now, you did have Uranus in Taurus from 2018 in your 10th house. And no doubt since 2018, your job has changed quite a bit. In particular, you might have found that you've needed to be master of your own destiny and that you're not enjoying it when people are telling you what to do so much. To me, this is a time, where your sovereignty becomes a lot more important and where you work out ways that you can manage yourself. so that you don't have somebody telling you what to do when you really feel in control. This isn't a time when you want to be directed and heavily managed and up against like measured goals and things like that. This is a time when you want to feel very spontaneous and free. And so as Uranus comes back in here, if you haven't freed yourself up somehow in the way that you were expecting, this is signaling that you're coming back to expand on it all again, and to look deeper at it. Now, it can be quite, in the 10th house, it can be quite destabilizing, because also what's happening in this month ahead, Uranus is in an opposition to Mars. That's easing off. He's also in an opposition to Mercury. He's in opposition to Mercury until the 10th of December. So a very strong energy. He's going to be in an opposition to the Sun and also Venus. So there's your sense of loving, your sense of identity, your sense of thinking, and your sense of activity are all being shaken up. And it feels like that what you know of yourself as somebody, as a home bird, and what your family's about versus the excitement of your potential career, it feels like your home is really in conflict with how you choose to be in your career. And my advice here is to not take it too personally right now. Don't make any big rash decisions, because once the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars get out of this opposition, you'll really quite enjoy Uranus being in your 10th house. It's just, at the start here, you're getting some pushback from your family and the people very, very close to you. But that will ease off. So don't burn any bridges just yet is my advice. And then on the 9th, Mercury is going retrograde. And, Mercury's got into your 5th house. It's a time when you felt quite creative and most likely want to start playing with the things that you're excited about. Start moving around in new ways and start putting your mind to these little creative thoughts. But as Mercury is going retrograde, it's taking you back into your home. And so one of the questions you might be asking yourself is, how can my creativity and my passion affect my home? How can I allow my amazing passion and my expression, my personal expression, how can I allow that to enrich my home in such a way that it's not going to stop my freedom? To me, that's a problem you might be solving for yourself. So that's the first bit of the week. It's pretty busy. And then from the 19th to the 22nd, this is pretty special. So by this point, Mercury is just retrograding back into Scorpio. We have the Mercury Cazimi, where your thoughts, your mind are really ready for a big breakthrough at the same time as the new moon in Scorpio. So there's the moon, Mercury retrograde, and the Sun all together at 28 degrees in your 4th house. To me, this is a beautiful invitation for something to change and transform at home. So if there's a new idea, a new way of being, a new idea, it might be that you're ready to move home, and that's your decision. But to me, it feels like there's a big decision to make at home that will change your life in a positive way. And that's something to get excited about. And then the Sun is moving into Sagittarius. And so it feels like there's this new idea that's going to change the way you are at home. And then once you've had that idea, the Sun moving into Sagittarius is then saying, okay, let's get cracking. Let's start working on this idea now. And so this is when I'm really seeing you come into your passionate self. And there's not much going on really right until the end of the month, when Venus also comes across into the sign of Sagittarius and Mercury has gone direct. It feels like it's you're down to business, you're heading straight into the future, you know the direction you're going into. So I think this is an interesting month, Leo. I think you are going to be breaking free of those patterns where you felt very trapped, but you're also developing a better and stronger relationship with those around you. So I hope that's helpful for you. Have a fabulous November and catch up with you next month. Lots of love. Bye for now. Hey there, Virgo Ascendant. So this is a short forecast for the month ahead of November 2025. This is a whole sign Western tropical model that I'm using. If when you look at your birth chart, you see that you've got Virgo and Libra in your first house, basically whatever is showing in your first house, whatever sign, that's the one to listen into. So you might find it helpful to listen into the Virgo one and the Libra one, FYI. Anyway, what I want to talk about are some of the main energies that are going on in Virgo. I speak about them a lot in the first part of this video. And so what I feel, first of all, I've plotted all of these little dots, plotted where they occur in the chart. So you get a feeling as to what side of your life, what part of your life is being really activated at the moment. And for you, it's your third and fourth house are really being activated, and then also your ninth house. And so the third house is very much, I think both of these houses, what they have in common is they're both about belonging. This is a time when you're really welcoming this feeling of belonging and knowing who you are, where you belong. And then later on in the month, in particular from the 22nd, you'll be really feeling into the home and the family and really enjoying that. But at the start of this is activating the marketplace side of your belonging. It's like, which community do you belong to? Who are your friends? Who do you see locally all the time? From shopkeepers to your neighbours, to your families, to schools, all sorts of different things, your work. This is also about your siblings and your peer groups. It's also talking about, what you know and the shared context about, where it is that you live. Like, what are the belief systems of people around you? What's really coming up as that sort of personality of where you live. And so all of this is what's creating your belonging. And this is one of the things that you're working on in this month ahead, is to feel that sense of I belong. Now, I'm going to break this down because there's definite areas in this month where there's a lot going on. And the first one I would say is from the 4th to the 9th. Then the 19th to the 22nd feels like quite an important little stretch. And then the last couple of days, I think things are starting to move forwards and shift forwards in a beautiful way. So it's really these first two bits that I want to talk about. So around the time of the full moon, and your full moon is up here in the 9th house. In fact, this is where you're not belonging to a community, but with the 9th house, you're belonging to the world. You're belonging to the world of ideas. You're belonging to the world of spirituality, belief systems, different nationalities, different cultures. This is quite an exciting time, and having a full moon here can really show where your world is about to expand somewhere new. And of course, the tension that comes up when exciting new things in the background start to permeate into your real life. It can feel a little bit threatening. Out of all the different places where you can have a full moon, this is one of the most fun ones. This is more pleasing than some of the other places. So I don't see it as being necessarily difficult, but the conundrum that comes up at the full moon, the time when the moon's in one place and the sun's exactly opposite, it's really about belonging and comfort and the safety versus the unknown. A place where you're a stranger and where things are exciting. And so it feels like at the beginning of this month, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, but especially on the 5th, on the actual day of the full moon, is your attentions are very much outside of where you belong. Almost like you're seeing the world with a fresh set of eyes. You're getting to see lots of different experiences. Maybe people from afar are coming into your world. Maybe you're having these new ideas that might seem a little shocking at first, but they're quite exciting. And so everything to do with outside of your world is coming into it. And so the 4th, 5th, 6th, 8th, and all the way to the 9th, I think, is helping you to see a little bit differently. During this time, Uranus is also backing back into the 9th house. Now, he was there from 2018 up until July the 7th, and then he moved into the sign of Gemini. But he's coming back in, and he's going to be there until the 26th of April next year. So he's coming back in for his last bit. Anywhere where you haven't fully expressed your need to feel like you belong to the world, and that you've applied your mind to create, like, to much bigger things. To me, it's like you're a voyager, like a seaman standing at the front of a ship, and you're like looking ahead into the distance, and there's that sense of adventure and this sense of fun, almost like, and again, I don't want to. This is what's coming up in my head as I'm thinking about it. It's like a hen night or a bachelor party. Before you get married. Before. I don't want to say one last fling, because I don't. I would not endorse that for anyone, and certainly that's not how I was spending my hen night. But the idea that, like, I really get the sense that Uranus in the 9th house, he's not going to be back here for another 84 years. So chances are you're not going to experience it. Not many people experience a full Uranus return where he comes back to where he was at the time, place and date of his birth. And you can't usually remember what happens in your first Uranus return because you're too young, when you were born, where he was. So to me, this is like your last bit of Uranus energy in this 9th house, which is about the adventure, about seeing things with a much bigger context. Not everyone is even going to experience Uranus in their 9th house. So it is quite important that anywhere where you had a list of things that you wanted to do, it's like the bucket list. And so I really think the full moon and Uranus moving back in here are kind of working together, Virgo. The full moon is maybe reminding you of the fact that there are other things out there and the world is massive. And then Uranus coming back here is a little bit disruptive, because all of a sudden, boom, there you are, you're wanting to explore the world. And then in the midst of this, Mercury goes retrograde from the 4th house, which is about the home and the family. And you're going back on a bit of a journey until the 29th of November. So to me, this is a bit of a conflict. There's the desire to get out into the world, and then Mercury is rethinking things at home. This is you rethinking things at home. Are you living in the way that really serves you? Is where you're living suiting the journey you're on right now? It might have suited you up until now. It might have been perfect for who you were, but with Uranus in the 9th, are you changing? This can occur with a need to travel to a different part of the world, or to live in a different way, maybe work and live in the same place. All sorts of unusual living, traveling situations can come up. So I'm not saying you're going to move, but Mercury retrograding in your 4th house may bring up a lot of thoughts about your home and family and what's important. Now, from the 19th to 20th, 22nd, this is where the nature of belonging and your community really come into a new clarity. So Mercury's retrograding back into the sign of Scorpio, which is in your 3rd house. It is making you rethink your whole community. So it's not just your home, but your place in the community. Is it still the right one for you? Some of your friends, your peers, all the stuff from the past. Like, is your community still the right fit for you? And then during that moment, on the 20th, we've got the new moon in Scorpio, and then Mercury is in a cazimi. He's super strong. This is a very, very powerful new moon. And you may well know your situation so well that you're making a choice. I really see this as a very strong choice point, where there's a new thought about your home and your sense of belonging. And then a couple of days later, as the moon is starting to grow again after the new moon, the sun's heading into Sagittarius. And then, I really think the Sagittarius season's coming on. Anything that you need to change or adapt or work on in terms of your home is going to get shifted. If after all this deliberation, you realize you're in the right place and living in the right way, then it will be quite easy. You'll crack on with it and sort of embed yourself back there. But if there are changes to be made, then I really see you're going to be making them or starting to make them from when Mercury goes direct on the 29th. Remember, Mercury is your ruling planet. And so, this retrograde is very strong for you. The Cazimi is super strong. And then when Mercury goes direct, to me, that's the release point of this whole decision process. And this is where you're moving forwards with real clarity. And then on the 30th, Venus also heads into the fourth house. And then you're really home and really ready to make those changes, whatever they are. So I hope that's helpful for you, Virgo, in understanding the month ahead. Wishing you a fabulous November and hope to catch up with you real soon. Lots of love. Bye for now. Hey there, Libra. This is an ascendant forecast for you for the month ahead of November 2025. It's a short one. And to get it going, I just want to share with you that if when you look at your birth chart, you see that you've got Libra in your first house, this is absolutely the right forecast for you. But if you've got Libra and Scorpio in your first house, then it's also worth listening into Scorpio to see how that also resonates with you. So this looks like I've been moving Smarties or Skittles or whatever multicolored candy you've got wherever you are around the birth chart. And what I've done is I've written down all the things that I think are important, all these energetic shifts in this month ahead in date order. And then I've put them in the different parts of the chart of where they're occurring. Now, it might look a bit wild and wacky, but hopefully it serves to show you where the development is taking place in this month ahead. And you can see there's a lot going on in the second house and the third, and then also something happening in the eighth. So, this is where we're going to be exploring. As ever, we've got a full moon and a new moon. And they're always, or mostly in opposite signs. Sometimes, one of them might just be in the next sign along ever so slightly because of the degrees that they're occurring in. But in this month ahead, we've got the full moon in the sign of Taurus, and we've got the new moon in the sign of Scorpio. And this is activating the second and the eighth houses. These are about value and self-worth. And I spoke about this a little bit at the beginning of the video. And so, these are definitely areas that are coming into their fore in the month ahead. This is where your focus is. Now, Venus is also a really strong planet in this month ahead, and she's your ruling planet. She rules Libra. And Venus is making two movements. These are likely to be helpful for you in terms of feeling like you're moving forwards. So on the 6th, she's going out of the first house and into the second. In the first house, you've been feeling quite confident in how you look and in who you are and how you feel in your body. When she goes into Scorpio on the 6th, you're likely, and she's a benefic planet, she's really helpful. She's known to help people in terms of what they're earning, and to help you see the value in what it is you do and who you are. And so Venus here in the second house, I think, is really turning your attentions to money in a very favourable way. And then right at the end of the month, she's going into Sagittarius. There she is. And then she's going to kind of put her magic, she's going to wave her magic wand in your third house where you get on with people. The third house is about the community and that sense of belonging to your community. And so I see this as a month ahead of where you're developing value in yourself. You're feeling a greater sense of self-esteem. You're ready to receive a lot more, get the balance back. Librans are terrible people pleasers, or they can be. And so this is absolutely a nudge to you to please yourself a little bit more and get ready to receive more. And then from the 22nd, the energy is really shifting into the community. So it's like you're building up your worth, and then you're heading into the community to really share your worth and your value as far and as wide as you can. Now, I also mentioned the 8th, where we've got the full moon on the 5th, and also Uranus is backing back into the sign of Taurus. Now, the 8th house is also, it's a house with value. It's about your partner's money, ancestral money, family money. It's also about the values that the people that you know and love, like your family, that you grew up with, maybe your partner. It's all of their expectations that they put on you, how they judge you. So this is where you're judging yourself. This is where they're judging you. It's known as being a place of death and taxes, but also sex, which I think really understates it. Sure, this could be a time of some amazing sex around the time of the full moon, but I really see this actually as being a place where we have a rite of passage. This is encouraging us to move from where we are and take the next step, and to kind of put on our big girl pants, pull up our socks and move forwards. This is a place where we face ourselves and face our shadow and move beyond it. So this is very strong. So, right, I'm going to break this down then. The 4th to the 9th is a very, very busy time. It's 1 week of this month ahead. Then the 19th to 22nd feels like a turning point. And then the 29th to 30th feels like it's all actions, all stations go. So let's understand this big week here. So it starts with Mars going into the 3rd house. It's inviting you to consider that you're gearing up to taking action in your local environment, in your local community. It's almost like that time when you get involved, you roll up your sleeves, and maybe you're volunteering, maybe you're helping out with something, but it feels like you've got a purpose, a purpose to achieve something, and to do good in your community. And that's great. I think that's really helpful. And it might also tie in with the full moon, because I always think with the full moon, we're feeling it a couple of days before and a couple of days after. But you could say, as Mars is going into the sign of Sagittarius, the energy is also about what's my value? How do the people around me see me? Am I having a crisis of confidence? Do I have enough? Can I trust that my partner has enough and that they will look after me if I'm not providing? All of these money issues between what you earn and what they earn, what you're supplying and what they're supplying, and the trust. Trust is a really big thing for the 8th house. And so, I think Mars going into the 3rd house to do with the community, just as the full moon is coming in, I think it could be very easy for you to overdo it in the community, because, your self-value might be aligned with your feelings of worth, and taking the cues from other people about how they feel about you. So, you might be listening more to other people's versions of you rather than knowing your own value yourself. So I really think knowing yourself and feeling your true value is one of the highlights or situations that are coming up with the full moon. That's what it's highlighting for you. When Uranus comes back into Taurus, it's also bringing up some core questions, I think. Uranus came into this part of your chart from 2018 up until the 7th of July this year. And then he went into Gemini, but now he's coming back in for the next 6 months. So October, we're in October, aren't we? Almost 6 months to the day. He's going out on the 26th of April back into Gemini. And, wherever Uranus is going, he's looking for you to get free of something. He's looking to help you liberate. And in the 8th house, one of the things you might be liberating for yourself is that desire to be liked by everyone. Uranus here, I think, trains you over and over and over again that not everyone is going to like you. You're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. you couldn't possibly do that anyway. And actually, you might not even want to. The only person that you need to like is yourself. And it's helpful if you do love yourself, because if you love or like yourself, then you'll start, you know, to me, it's an invitation for you to make really good friendships that, you know, where you're not overreaching yourself, where you're not people pleasing too much, you know, but you're seeing to yourself first, you're including yourself. Because when you include yourself, and I got this from a fabulous friend who's got a lot of Libra in her chart, when you include yourself, the world starts to include you as well. You see yourself. And so Uranus coming in here is the reminder and the invitation that there's a little bit more to do. And what comes up for you around the time of the full moon, I think, is paving the way for Uranus to come back in. He's like opening the door, and he's already set up the workspace for Uranus. During this time, Venus is also coming into the second house, like I mentioned. And so, yes, you're going to be on full offensive to work out what your true value is. And then on the 9th, Mercury is moving from the community space, from this place of friendships and belonging, and he's coming back into this place of what your value is. So I think you're really working this value out in real time. I think this retrograde is going to be offering you lots of different ideas over the course of the next 3 weeks. You know, different situations as they come up are all going to be informing you about what your true value is. So that's the first week. I really think it's getting you thinking and preparing you for this sort of deeper inner work, but also helping you expand on the things that you like to do and the things, I think, where your purpose is. Now, between the 19th and 22nd, I said this is like the turnaround point. So at that point, Mercury actually gets back into the second house. He is also coming into an exact conjunction with the sun, just as the moon does. So we've got a new moon at 28 degrees and also a Mercury cazimi. This is a time when Mercury is super strong, really strong, and where you can absolutely have a breakthrough message or a breakthrough level of insight. See, in your chart, Mercury rules the 12th house, which is a place of the unconscious insight, and also the 9th house, which is a place of higher context and spirituality. So I do think you're about to have a big breakthrough in how you see yourself and what you understand your deservability to be. I really think that's going to change your way of being. And then hot on the heels of that, the sun is moving into the 3rd house. It's like once you've got a clearer view of your worth and your love for yourself, then, you know, the energy is really coming into this 3rd house, so you can make what adjustments you want to make for yourself. You can decide how much or how little you get involved in what's going on around you. But to me, it feels like you've resolved something. And then from the 29th, it just feels like you're really cooking on gas. You're really moving forwards. Mercury goes direct. And then finally, on the 30th, your ruling planet Venus also heads into Sagittarius. And so as you start December, you're going to be a lot more confident because you have worked out your true worth. So I'm going to leave that there, Libra. I hope that was helpful for you. Wishing you a beautiful November, and catch up with you real soon. Lots of love. Hey there, Scorpio Ascendant. So this is your November forecast for the month ahead. It's a whole sign Western tropical model that I'm using. And if when you look at your birth chart, you've got just Scorpio in your first house, and this is absolutely for you. If you've got Scorpio and Sagittarius in your first house, then you'll also find listening to Sagittarius helpful. So you might need to combine the two. Now, this looks like I've thrown a load of Smarties or Skittles or whatever they're called in your country over the birth chart. And I kind of have. I've listed all the different things that I think are energetic shifts in this month ahead, including all the planetary changes, Mercury's retrograde to his going direct, and also the full moon on the 5th and also the new moon on the 20th. It's a very intense time. And when you know, because I've sort of noted all these little changes, almost like a little pictogram, you can see where the busy areas are. And for you, the energy is moving from the first house and into the second. And then we've got this 7th house full moon and also Uranus going back into the 7th house. So there's the polarity between the 1st and the 7th house, and also the new focus coming later on in this month ahead into the sign of Sagittarius. So let's get cracking. What I want to do with this, Scorpio, is to break it down into 3 different time zones. I see it as being super busy. And that the first one is from the 4th to the 9th. You know, there's a lot of energetic shifts. We've got 1, 2, 3 sign changes, and we've got Mercury going retrograde and a full moon. I mean, that's very intense. Almost one a day. There's a little gap between Venus moving into Scorpio and also Uranus moving back into Taurus. And then between the 19th and the 22nd, we've got a shift that I think is the decision or the resolution. You know, so this is the 4th to the 9th is setting up a problem or a situation or a feeling, like an inquiry. I see the 19th to the 22nd setting up a resolution, like the new direction that you're going to take. And then the 29th to 30th, I think, are they're almost like the go-aheads. They're the green lights to move forwards. So let's dig even deeper. Now, coming into the time of the full moon, I don't know if you're like me, but I think the full moon almost starts a couple of days before and goes on a little bit after. You know, the energies really rise up. You can feel them, especially if you're empathic, and Scorpio ascendants tend to be. And so, you know, you could say that Mars, one of your ruling planets going into the sign of Sagittarius, is kind of full moony. You know, it's moving under the auspices of this full moon. And so it's quite passionate. You know, Mars has been in your first house for quite a while. And when he heads into Sagittarius, it's like you're preparing to get quite busy about your work, and about how you're earning money. It's a time when you're feeling maximum levels of confidence, which is encouraging. And so it's like you're putting your best foot forwards. It feels exciting. And then the full moon is coming up, and it's really expanding into your 7th house. Now, this can be quite helpful if you're on a romantic date. Can be quite helpful. It could be a nice day to go out for a date if you're really ready for it, and if you don't have any underlying emotional problems just bubbling up underneath. You know, full moons are best enjoyed when I think we've cleared up some space. A bit like, you know, when you're using your computer to do something really special, you do need to, I definitely do need to, like, kind of just get rid of all the old crap that you've got stored on your computer. So you've got some processing power. You've got some space for your computer to work it out. And I think if you are going out and doing something with your partner, or doing something to meet a new partner around this time, you want to make sure that you've cleared as much space around you in your life so that you can pay full attention to what's going on. Full moons in the 7th often show up that your partners, the people around you, seem a lot more emotional than usual. But of course, the moon is like a huge projection screen, and the full moon in the 7th is also reflecting back to you those parts of you that you can't see in yourself. You'll see them in the people that are showing up in your life. So if you're thinking, bloody hell, look, they're really emotional, you might realize that you've got some emotion going on behind the scenes too. But this is interesting because a couple of days later, 3 days later, Uranus is heading back into the 7th house. And so I really feel like this full moon is like the opening chapter to Uranus coming back into Taurus. He's coming back in after being away since July, and he's going to be there until the 26th of April 2026. So you've got around about 6 months of Uranus back in Taurus, and anything in your relationships that you haven't upgraded, that you haven't made more exciting, more conscious, more liberating, it just feels like it's back to finish the job. Uranus in the 7th house is there to help you have more conscious relationships, and it can absolutely bring a lot more conscious people into your life. If you've got a business, this can be a time when all of a sudden your clients maybe really fit the ethos of your business. You can really attract the right frequency and vibration. However, Uranus is also known as being a planet that can bring up chaos and, sorry, I got hiccups. It can also bring in like changeability, irritability, things that aren't necessarily reliable. So you might be, this full moon where you might feel that the people around you aren't as solid as they usually are, that maybe they're a little bit eclectic, eccentric and changing. That's, Uranus is coming in to give you a bit more practice on this. And, one of the things, I've had Uranus in my 7th house very, very recently, for quite a few years, obviously like a good 7 years or so. And so I've learned a lot. And what this has really taught me in my relationships is when people aren't as reliable as you might have come to expect, when they've been a lot more independent, when the people around you have been a lot more sort of self-centered and following what brings them joy. And I shouldn't say that that's self-centered, but, like when people that you've relied upon and shared with suddenly seem quite different, which can definitely happen when Uranus comes into the 7th house. What it's taught me is it's given me permission to be eccentric and independent myself. Like I said, I think the 7th house is a projection screen. Whatever you're experiencing in the people around you is reminding you what you need to do yourself. And so this is your time to not be so responsible. This is your time to be a lot more unpredictable and eccentric and to follow your own path. And it's funny because as you start to follow your own path and your partner or your best friend or the people around you are following their own paths, you're all kind of lifting yourselves up together. You find that, the fear is if I do this on my own, we'll fall apart. But in actual fact, you can grow side by side. And so Uranus here has a very important message, I think. I didn't expect to go on that long about it, but it seems quite important. The 1st and 7th houses are really, I think, super important. These, I would arguably say they're the 2 most important houses. I know that's like the cardinal sin, saying one house is more important than the other, but yeah, they are critical places. So there's a lot going on around self, like here with Mars going into the 2nd house, you're wanting to take action on your career and you're desperate to get going. And at the same time, the people around you are showing you that it's okay for you to be independent because they sure are as well. So it's quite helpful. And Venus is coming into Scorpio, your 1st house, straight after. It's really raising your personal magnetism up quite considerably. It's quite helpful. And then on the 9th, Mercury is coming out of your 2nd house, or he's going retrograde in your 2nd house. To me, this is a rethink of your personal brand. This is saying, get ready. You're going to see yourself very differently soon. So that's the first of these big times. The next big time is, I think, a transformation time where you're ready to move forwards with a new energy. And this is really coming about on the 19th when Mercury comes back into your 1st house, into your sign. The very next day, Mercury is exactly in the same place as the new moon, which means we've got a Mercury Cazimi new moon in your 1st house. My goodness, that's really, really powerful. And that's really asking you, what is your new identity? Who are you choosing to be right now? If you could be anyone and live any life, what would it be? What are you choosing for yourself? I mean, it really is putting you in the hot seat of choosing. At the time of the full moon, you maybe don't feel like you're doing the choosing because, there are people you're in relationship with, and there's maybe some sort of toing and froing and, you know, a tug of war between you. But the new moon is giving you that clear place. Who are you choosing to be? And then after the new moon, as the moon starts to grow again, the sun goes into Sagittarius, into this place where you're building your own value. And then on the 29th, Mercury goes direct in your first house, and then he'll be moving towards your second house just as Venus goes into your second house. And so I think as you're coming to the end of this month and getting ready for December, I think you're in quite an optimistic state of mind. You've rebranded yourself, you're feeling a lot more positive, and with that clear focus, you can now start to attend to how you earn money, how you build value, how you demonstrate it, and start earning some big bucks. So that's where I'm going to leave it, Scorpio. I hope that's helpful for you. Wishing you a fabulous November, and catch up with you real soon. Lots of love. Bye for now. Hey there, Sagittarius. This is the month ahead forecast for November 2025. And if you are familiar with your birth chart, and when you look at your birth chart, you see that you've got Sagittarius in your first house, then this is indeed the right ascendant forecast for you for Sagittarius. If when you look at your birth chart, you've got Sagittarius and Capricorn in your first house, then you'll also find Capricorn helpful as well. Anyway, I've written here all the big sort of shifts going on in November as I see them, all the different planetary changes. We've got planets moving forwards. We've also got Uranus and Mercury, or is it moving backwards, retrograde. We've also got the full moon and also a new moon. We've also got a Mercury cazimi. So there's a lot going on. Venus is moving twice, in fact. And so what I've done is I've put each of these dots, I've put them in the part of the chart that they're referring to, where they're taking action. So this is like a pictogram. It's really describing where the energy is really showing up in your charts in this month ahead. And you can see there's a lot going on here from the 12th house and into the first house. And also there's energy in the 6th. Now, if we look at the position of, in fact, I need to move this around ever so slightly because this new moon is right at the edge of the 12th house in the sign of Scorpio, and this full moon is in the 6th house. So it's going against the 6th and the 12th house polarity. So I'm definitely going to be commenting on that. So yeah, and the other thing that I'm going to be looking at is I'm going to be breaking the month down into little sections. So as I see it, the 4th to the 9th is this very intense packet of energy that's really showing us what we're thinking about, what we're mulling over, what we're getting prepared to move on. And then between the 19th and the 22nd, I think we're making a decision. It really looks like a decision point. And then from the 22nd to the 30th and beyond, we're cooking on gas, we're really moving forwards. And from the 29th, it gets even clearer. So the 4th to the 9th, I see intense energy. The 19th to 22nd, we're making a decision. And then beyond that, we're moving forwards. Okay, so let's break this down. First of all, I want to talk about the energy from the 12th house and into the 1st, and also the polarity between the 6th and the 12th house. In fact, I'll start there. You know, each of the houses is almost a story in its own right, and they all link together, showing a progression. And by the time we get to the 6th house is very much about our day-to-day, how we organise our time, our routines. You know, are we methodical? It's almost like the office manager of your whole life. It's your diary. It's all those things that you do regularly. It will describe your work and how you handle your money and how you handle your health, your workout routine if you have one. Everything to do with your routine is encapsulated in it. And so I also choose to think that the 6th house is full of stories. You know, this is the place that is telling the story of where your energy is and how busy you are. You know, for a lot of people, we define ourselves based on the activities we're doing. And so our stories are almost ruling us. Now, conversely, by the time we get right the way around the houses, we come to the 12th house, which I think is really telling us about the stories we're letting go of. You know, this is where we're kind of detaching from everything and preparing a big open space so that when we're ready to go again, we create a whole new story. We start from scratch. And this is the 11th house. You know, the 12th house is all about losing that story, tuning in, getting to the core of who we are, really letting go of everything, taking off all the clothes, all the hats, everything we've been wearing, all the personas. And then as we're moving through the 12th house, we're creating space. We come into the first house every year for the Sagittarius season. And then all of a sudden, that's the start of our new story. So this is all about the stories. And so if I start here, I always think the full moon starts a day or two before. It's not exact. You know, we're coming into that full moon period. We all start to feel full moony. Life gets a bit busier, a bit more tense, a bit, you know, there's a few more things buzzing around. And so we've got Mars moving into our first house. That's usually a signal for us that it's time to feel very vigorous and to start working in our body. And then we get the full moon in Taurus. Now, this full moon is really highlighting all the plates that you've got spinning right now. All of them, all the little stories, all the routines, all the bills you've got to pay, all the agreements and commitments that you've signed up for. Everything is coming at you, it feels like, with this full moon. And so this isn't like, it's unlikely to be a terribly romantic time or necessarily interesting. It's a time where it's like, oh my God, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this. A full moon in the 6th house often feels quite overwhelming. And you might also realize that there's a lot of stories, a lot of things that you're doing around the time of the full moon that maybe you've outgrown and it's time to let them go. So in many respects, getting overwhelmed on Wednesday the 5th is actually your cue to say, hang on a second, let me just have a look at all of this step by step. And you go through every single thing that you're doing. And then you realize, a bit like sometimes you might check your bank statement and you might think, oh my God, I've got a couple of subscriptions here that actually I no longer use. You know, this is you fact finding and checking things out. So this full moon is going to really show you what is superfluous, what is not part of your story anymore. And then you'll get very, very clear on what is still persisting. Something else to watch out for, the 6th house is also a place of our health. And of course, if we get emotional, we might get into dis-ease. So be really cautious and careful about what you're saying to yourself. Really from now, as I'm recording this on the 30th of October, be really mindful of the health stories you're creating for yourself in the lead up to this full moon, because you know, you might just suddenly get like this headache, like this tension headache, or, you know, your stomach might be all nervous because there's too much going on. So take deep breaths, you know, look after yourself, get plenty of rest. In particular, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, rest up as much as you can. Because if you're too busy and anxious or your body's in knots, it's going to be hard to see the stories that are playing out. Now, on the 6th, you've also got Venus coming into the 12th house straight after the full moon. And Venus, I think, is there to be a balm to your intuition. It's almost like Venus in the 12th house, I feel like it's a little bit like taking the rescue remedy. It's a sedative. It's like taking CBD drops. This is you chilling out and relaxing and going into a dream state. It's like having a cup of chamomile tea to just really, really soothe you down. It's that sort of, what is it, like tryptophan, serotonin, no, dopamine. It's like the dopamine for you. And so she's encouraging you to rest and to soak up the relaxation, like going for, a hot steam and having a massage as well. Now, a day later or 2 days later, Uranus is backing back into the 6th house. Now, this is why it's so important to do your due diligence around the time of the full moon, to rest up and to recognize what is still relevant and what's not. Because as Uranus, which is a bit like a whirlwind and a storm, and I can't even get my hands circling at the same time, but you know, it's like a whirlwind of energy coming back into your carefully laid plans. And so where you have, you know, set your plans in place, Uranus is back here to turn it upside down. He is going to bring lots of change, lots of ideas, lots of innovation. And you might realize actually your life needs to change a lot more than that. Uranus was already here from 2018 until July the 7th this year. And then he moved into Gemini. But when he came here, he was on a mission. Not even everyone is going to get to have Uranus going through their 6th house. It takes him 84 years to do the whole circuit. So, if he's in your 6th house right now, he's here as part of your life's path. He's here to show you where your routine is too solid, or where you don't have enough freedom built in, where there's not enough spontaneity. All of these things are things that Uranus really value. And so if things are getting too calamitous, it's because there's too much going on and not enough space. So he is here to help you create more space in your life, so that you can do the things that really are your vibrational match and not have to waste your time with things that really don't feel like it. So yeah, there's like Mars in your first, it's moving you forwards and increasing your confidence. Venus in your 12th is like a sedative. So they're kind of contradictory, like you've got this sedating relaxation and also this desire. It's almost like trying to drive forwards with your handbrake on. And at the same time, there's this feeling of, what's superfluous? What stories have I got holding me back? Now, I really think that by the end of this month, Venus is going to be in the 1st house. You will be driving forwards and that handbrake will be off. You'll be able to move forwards really, really easily. And then on the 9th, Mercury that's already in your 1st house, really helping you tune into what patterns are important to you. And you're thinking, you're probably a lot more chatty than usual. Mercury's going to go retrograde. And so a Mercury retrograde from your 1st house is you rethinking your personality and rethinking the life that belongs to your personality and your persona and how you've created it. So that's the first bit. It's a maelstrom of energy. It's massive. And then you're obviously doing this big thinking, Mercury's retrograde and you're adapting to all the energies. And then the next stage is the 19th to 22nd. So Mercury goes back into your 12th house, back into the darkness, back into your intuition. It's a time when you really want to think, probably need to sit down on your own a little bit, think things through, followed by the new moon in the 12th house and Mercury Cazimi. This is such a huge opportunity for you to have a big breakthrough and almost decide the opening chapter for your next book. It's almost like you've been caught between two worlds, and November is going to really help you say goodbye to the old one and welcome in the new one. I really feel like as you're closing the door in November, it's opening, a whole new chapter for you. I really feel that. So the 19th, Mercury's back into the 12th, the Cazimi in the new moon, it's asking you to decide what's important and then to build your life from what is important. Just take it from there. You just notice what's the most important thing and then move. Every decision you make is this taking me closer or further away from what's important? And yeah, it really has got you back to your core. It's like stripped everything else away. And then the sun's in your 1st house. So you've got the sun in your 1st house. You've got Mars in your 1st house. Then on the 29th, Mercury is it's moving forwards again. And then finally on the 30th, you've got the sun, Mars and Venus in your 1st house. To me, that is really when you start to move forwards, knowing the shape and size of your story and the outline. And then it's really easy to put one foot in front of the other, or like I said, take that handbrake off and get moving. So I hope that's helpful for you, Sagittarius, in working out your next few moves. Wishing you a really fabulous November and catch up with you all soon. Bye for now. Hey there, Capricorn Ascendant. This is your Western Tropical Whole Sign forecast. It's an ascendant forecast for the month of November 2025. Now, if when you look at your birth chart, you've got Capricorn in your 1st house, and this is absolutely the right one for you. If you've got Capricorn and Aquarius in your 1st house, then that's also a nudge for you to have a listen to Aquarius, because that will also ring a few bells. In setting this reading up, I wrote down all the things that I think are important, you know, the things that are showing the shifts from all of the astrological data in November. These are the most important ones, I think, that are shifting all of us the most. So I've written them in date order, and there's a dot to represent each of them on this chart. And the great thing about doing this is I get to see where the busy areas are in your chart, you know, because that's where the most action is taking place. And so, yeah, to me, you can see here that there's a lot, you know, the personal planets are moving from the 11th and into the 12th house. That's definitely got a theme to it, which I'll talk about in a sec. But we've also got the full moon in your 5th house, and 3 days later, Uranus is moving into your 5th house. So the 5th house is being awakened right at the start of November, and there'll be a reason for it, you know. Meanwhile, there's a lot going on in your 11th and into your 12th house. So that's what I'm hoping to pick up on. Now, I've also broken it down into 3 kind of timestamps. The first is the 4th to the 9th, which I really see as the starting energy. There are energies that are competing, that are, you know, at times it feels like you're, you know, using your accelerator and your brake at the same time. There are some energies that are conflicting, and yet they're both important. And so I'll talk about those. That's the 4th to the 9th. Then we got the 19th to the 22nd, and that sort of date stamp is a time when I think you're making decisions, clear decisions to move forwards. And then the last 2 dates at the end, they are the dates, I think, when you've really got the go ahead and you've got the green light and you're starting to move forwards with pace. So what's it all mean? Okay, let's break this down. First of all, I want to just talk about the 5th house and the 11th house and the 12th. So we'll start with the 5th because that's where the full moon is, and that's where Uranus is moving back into. Now, Uranus was here from 2018 up until July the 7th this year. Then he went into Gemini. Now he's back here for another 6 months. And so Uranus, wherever he goes, he's trying to liberate your energy in that particular part of the chart. Now, in a lifetime, we don't consciously get to experience Uranus, you know, maybe twice in your life at different times when you'd remember them, unless you live to be well over 100 and keep your brains the whole time. I mean, there's an 84-year cycle on this. And of course, children often don't remember things, you know, from birth. So this is a kind of, you know, a one-time energy. And so he's already been in your 5th house and he's coming back for the last 6 months, and he's there to finish off everything to do with the 5th house and Taurus for you. Now, your 5th house is a place of where love comes in, new love comes in if you're single, or where we reunite and relight the flames of desire in our existing relationships. It's also a place where we might want to conceive children and bring them to term. It's also a place where our children show up. So Uranus coming in here can talk a lot about our children and our desires for children. So love, children. And then there's the things that lift you up, the things that fill you with passion, and the things that you're intimate about. You know, so it's a sexual house, but it's also a place where our creative hobbies can be really explored and where we're birthing something. Ultimately, I think the 5th house is about our self-expression and going really deep into our soul's yearning. So it's an important part. And so to the level that you really freed up yourself and started to live with passion, feel with great intensity and great intimacy, and have been expressing your path, to the extent you've been doing that, you've been fulfilling Uranus's goal for you. Now, where you haven't done that, he's coming back to give you another 6 months to give it a go. So hopefully you already know what I'm talking about in terms of that. Now, this full moon, 3 days before Uranus comes back here, the full moon is going to be emphasizing all of those desires, all that passion, all of that joy that you're wanting to experience. And so if you're going on a date that night, it could be quite good. This is a great time to connect with your partner, if you have one, and it's a great time to connect with your children. However, the sun is always in the opposite sign to the full moon, and so if there's any difficulty going on between you and your kids, and stepkids show up here, by the way, so that if there's tension between your kids and stepkids, that can really show up around this time as well. But yeah, this is fun. This could bring in a lot of fun. Out of all the different places that we could have a full moon, this is not a bad place to have a full moon. This can be quite enlightening and really tune us back into what is going to lift us up. So it's preparation for Uranus. That's how I see it. Now, at the other side of the chart, we've got 11th house highlighted. The 11th house is where Venus is going into in the sign of Scorpio. It's also where the sun is throughout most of this month. It's where the new moon is going to be. And so the 11th house is about our friendships. It's also about our networks, our influence, and how much our influence can grow. I also think it's a place of the law of attraction, and where we have real visions that we're wanting to bring about. This is a place where we're in creation, and this is where we're in co-creation. So this is us working on our passions. This is where life is helping us, and it might be our friends helping us. So this is a place where we might want to be working on a vision with somebody else, or at least with the universe. You might be using the law of attraction. And so, as we've gone through this place in our chart and we head into the 12th house, the 12th house is almost like where we've, our creative energies have come to the end of the road. And as we hit the 12th house, we're really ready to bring all of our learning back into ourselves and to rest up a little bit, So part of this month, up until the 22nd, I think is really about us taking action and getting out and about and meeting the people that we love, but also meeting people that we can do things with that might be able to help us with some of our goals, and where you might be able to help them with some of their goals. It's very, very collaborative. And then as we're coming to the end of the month, we're thinking, do you know what? It's time to put our feet up. It's almost like you've been working for 3 seasons solid, and it's just time to rest up. When planets come into our 12th house, and this is the time of year when they're always coming up into your 12th house, this is our time. If we were like a bear, we would be going into hibernation. So I see the 12th house as us resting, reflecting, journaling, nourishing ourselves and not rushing. We're slowing right down so that we can really see the wood for the trees and know what our expression will be after, coming into Christmas, when everything starts to move into our own sign. So, to put this into context, we've got Mars at the start of the month going into the 12th house, showing that whilst you might be in a collaborative energy, your energy is really not at its highest from the 4th. When Mars goes into the sign of Sagittarius, this is a time when you might want to use your body in more of a meditative way, sort of stretching, Tai Chi, yoga type thing, rather than high intensity workouts. This is a time when you might go on retreats and things like that, when you might do some kind of purge, some kind of hero's journey, or sort of plant medicine kind of thing. So you're taking action to go inwards and to go back into yourself. This is a time to rest, not be running a marathon. So that's my first thought. Then we've got the full moon, where you can be delightfully enjoying yourself and delightfully working on something that feels passionate for you. Then we've got Venus coming into Scorpio, and maybe life is showing us who we can collaborate with. Maybe after the full moon, we've got some ideas of people we might want to work with and to enjoy the energies with. But again, it's not too active. It's social. It's collaborative, but you're not meant to be working at high intensity. And then on the 9th, we've got Mercury moving back through the 12th house. Now, this is interesting because Mercury in the 12th house is intuitive and very, very private. And so, you know, with Mars and Mercury in the 12th, there's a lot of privacy going on. You know, again, not high intensity. This is more about you reflecting on what's happened in the last season. What have you learned? What do you need to learn more of? What can you let go? What can you understand from this? So that's setting the scene for this month ahead. You know, it really feels like you're concerned with what's lifting you up. You're lightly socializing and collaborating, and also gently relaxing and reflecting. Then we get to the 19th to 22nd, and that's when Mercury goes back into the 11th house. It's almost as if you have reflected, gone on an inner journey, and now you need to check in with the people around you and see how your new summaries, your summations, your new answers and directions and potential thoughts, you know, you're connecting with people to see how they fit in. Does this stand up? Does this bear to scrutiny? And to me, this is you opening up to people. And also it could be a time when you're really highly collaborative with the law of attraction, like you're creating from a universal perspective. Now, the day after, Mercury's in a cazimi in the new moon. That's a real decision point. So if you're not feeling social, at least put out a big prayer or a big intention, you know, set the scene for what it is you're wanting to create for yourself. Especially if it's social, especially if it has to do with influence and meeting the right people at the right time that can help you move forwards. And then from the 22nd, the sun's going into Sagittarius. Mercury will be going direct again and will end up, you know, at the end of Scorpio. And then Venus is coming into Sagittarius. So as we're ending this month, or as you're ending this month, the planets are at their sleepy time. They're in the hibernation phase. To me, it feels like you've lived a whole year and it's time to rest, recuperate, and just to enjoy the remaining feelings of what you've been passionately working on and then playfully connecting with. So just, you know, this isn't a time to take masses of action. It's just a time to reflect and reframe. As we come into December, there's going to be another shift and you'll be coming back into your own sign at the end of December. So I'm going to leave that there, Capricorn. Hope that's helpful for you. Sending you loads of love and catch up with you real soon. Bye for now. Hey Aquarius. So this is the start of your November forecast, 2025. And if when you look at your birth chart, you see the sign of Aquarius in your first house, that's perfect. If when you're looking at your first house, you see Aquarius, but also Pisces, that's your prompt to also check out the Pisces message, because you also have Pisces in your first house. Of course, Pisces just follows straight on after this. Now, I was looking at all the shifts that are going on in this month ahead, and I listed them down, created a little color code for them. You see all the Mercury ones are in red. Venus is in pink. Now, I've put them in their place where they're occurring. And what transpires is you can really see which areas of the chart are being really lit up in this month ahead. So we're going from the 10th house and into the 11th house. So there's a real sort of switch in your story, and I'll talk about both of those houses. And then we've got the full moon in Taurus in your 4th house. And we've also got Uranus, which is one of your ruling planets, that's heading back into your 4th house a few days later. So the 4th house has definitely been highlighted for a reason. It feels like the 4th house is awakening. It's knocking on your door to deliver a message. And then the 10th and the 11th house is also important. Now, of course, the 10th and the 4th house, they're in a polarity together. And they are associated with the home and the career. And so the new moon in the 10th versus the full moon in the 4th. It's really creating the dynamic of where are you going to put your energy right now, in your home or up here in your career? Which one's going to win? So as I look at these dates, I notice that they fall into 3 packets or 3 sort of timestamps. The first one is from the 4th to the 9th. There's a lot going on there. There's a lot of energy shifts going on. I think the week, you know, between the 4th and the 9th is going to be intense. Lots going on. To me, this is sowing the seeds. It's putting everything on the table, all the ingredients on the table, so you can see what you're going to use. And you might find some of these ingredients are a bit clashing. You know, they're not necessarily going to work together very well, but you see what you've got. And then between the 19th and the 22nd, this is a decision point. You know, we've got the new moon in your 10th house. Mercury's just gone back into your 10th house retrograde. Mercury's in a conjunction with the new moon. He's in a cazimi. This is a huge decision point, if ever there was one. And to have it in your 10th house is really, I think, giving you a new decision about your career, a new focus. And then from the 22nd to the 30th, I think that's just really giving you the green lights. You know, when Mercury goes direct, there's another green light. And on the 30th, as Venus goes into Sagittarius, there's your third and final one. And then as you're going into December, you're going in with some very, very free energy. So what does this all mean? Let's start unpacking this. So the full moon then, in the 4th house, this is one of the most sensitive places to have the full moon, because this is about the house, the home, your stability, your moods, your behaviors. It's a very, very private place. This is a very public place. So this full moon, it's showing that things are a lot more intense at home. Maybe your partner or family are more emotional. You might be feeling a lot more emotional. It's bringing up a lot of stuff. You might feel very nostalgic. It's a time when you do want to kind of pull the covers over you a bit more and not be so outward. And given that there's so many outward positions at the moment, really out and about in your career, out and about with your friends, if you're in the 11th house, to me that, you know, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, you're really wanting to pull the covers up, you know, warm up next to a fire, be around only those people you really trust the most, and maybe your trusted pets. So yeah, it might be emotional, but it could be very, very cozy. And you're really getting a sense of what home is about. And, you know, anything that's discordant is likely to show up at this time because the energies are high. And then a couple of days later, 3 days later, Uranus comes back in. Now, Uranus was here from 2018 up until the 7th of July. He's coming back. He's here to finish his job. And he's not going to be here for another 84 years. So, you know, if you don't get this message in the next 6 months from Uranus in Taurus, you're unlikely to get it. And so he's here, wherever he goes, he's here to liberate the energy, to help people raise in consciousness, to feel a lot more confident, you know, around their home, a lot freer, a lot more eccentric, eclectic, less stable. And that's the difficulty because, you know, the 4th house and the home, it is all about stability. And then, you know, planets like Uranus come in and they shove the family around and the house around. So it feels a bit unstable. But what it's doing is it's really finding out what you are about. He's also there to show you what your unshakable faith is, because he's going to give you quite a few shakes. And, you know, anything that's really not you is going to get shaken free. And anywhere where you're forcing yourself into stability that's not suiting you, that won't last. And so at the end of this Uranus time, you'll have much cleaner foundations to be able to build on. You know, I often find people move home around this time, you know, so the home that you've set up, you're consciously taking it apart and moving your home somewhere else. You might find it's a time when someone new comes in, but there's something innovative, changeable, and excitable about it. And so this full moon is really picking up those tensions. You're really starting to feel it. It's like the postman's delivering the letter on the 5th, and you open the letter and it says Uranus is coming back. And you're like, oh, okay. So that's going on there. At the same time, in this week ahead, you've got Mars heading into Sagittarius. This is a time when you're actively making new connections, actively seeking out people. You might find that people are wanting to do stuff with you, which is great. You got Venus going into the 10th house. That's fantastic, because Venus in the 10th really makes you look amazing. It helps you to be seen in the best light. You know, people love you. They can't get enough of you. People understand your work, your efforts, your legacy. It's a fantastic time to be looking for a new job, as is, you know, with Mars in the 11th house, it really helps you. So this is a great time for the outward direction you're going in. And then we've got Mercury going retrograde back into the 10th house. When Mercury heads back into the 10th house, it's like there's some things you've forgotten about in terms of your career that you want to pick up on and kind of rewrite into your career plan. So it feels like you've got a few things to think about. You know, there's stuff going on at home. There's this ongoing shaking going on at home at a time when it's really quite exciting in your career. And then, you know, there'll be the usual moon movements during this time. And then we're heading into the 19th to 22nd. This is the bit where things are activating. So I really think you're working things out. And by the time Mercury comes back in here, we've got the Mercury Cazimi in a conjunction with the new moon in the 10th house. This is a decision you're making about your career. So, yeah, who knows what you're going to do with it, but it's a very, very strong new moon, one of the strongest new moons for you in this whole year. From the 22nd, as the sun is heading into Sagittarius, this is a time when you're really invited to meet and mix with people. I mean, this is a time when you could meet the best people that you need on your journey. You know, maybe around the time of the new moon or earlier this month, you might write a list of all the people, like if you had a would like to meet list, you know, because the 11th house is a very magical manifestatory place where the right contacts can come in at the right time, but only if you're open to it. So I do see you're coming into this time of openness. And then the 29th, Mercury's moving forwards, you know, really going forwards. And then on the 30th, Venus is moving into Sagittarius. To me, this is a great move. You know, Venus, as she comes into your 11th house, is really helping you have much lighter relationships. So, yeah, I think this is intense. But I also think this is going to be fun. You're moving in a really great direction for your career. And there's some powerful people lining up to help you. And underneath it all, there's some shaking going on. But, you know, if your career's on the move, maybe where you're living isn't the right place. All this will, I think, make more sense. And of course, Uranus is going to be here for a while, so you don't have to make any home decisions just yet. But your career ones, I think you do. So I'm going to leave that there, Aquarius. I hope that was helpful. Have a fabulous November and catch up with you real soon. Bye for now. Hey there, Pisces. This is your forecast for November 2025. This is a whole sign Western tropical forecast, ascendant forecast. And if when you look at your first house, you have got Pisces and Aries in your first house, then it's also helpful to watch the Aries forecast. So hope that helps you. Now, I've gone through the whole of November and all the different movements, and there's hundreds of movements. But these are the ones I think are the most important things to mention about November. And so this is to give you a sort of 10, 15-minute update about the month ahead and what will be helpful. Each of these little circles I've also plotted onto the birth chart, so you can see where there's more happening, you know, where there's more events taking place. You can see we've got the full moon in the 3rd house and the new moon in the 9th house in opposition. We've got things moving in through Scorpio and later into Sagittarius as this month goes on. We've also got Uranus at the bottom transitioning out of Gemini and back into Taurus. And so, yeah, I want to start here because this is happening at the start. Now, you'll see that I'm going to be talking about time in these 3 particular timestamps. The 4th to the 9th, because to me this is just such a busy 5 days, huge 10 days, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 6 days. Yeah, this is an intense time, the 4th to the 9th, big shifts going on, including 3 planetary changes, Mercury retrograde and a full moon. Doesn't get bigger than that. And then we've got the 19th to 22nd, which I see as being a time of committing to a new decision, like really making a big decision and sticking with it. It feels like you're doing a lot of thinking things through as Mercury's going retrograde. And so by the time we get to Mercury retrograding back into Scorpio, making a cazimi and being in a conjunction with the new moon, that's a really big day on the 19th and into the 20th. And I think that's going to be really informing you. And then the 22nd to the 29th, the 30th, each of those is like a green light. Each of those is saying, yep, yes, even more. And these are all about moving forwards or moving into Sagittarius. So let's start with this full moon in the sign of Taurus in your 3rd house. The 3rd house is a place where it's of your community. It's a lot about what you know about what's going on around you. It's a place of your peers, your siblings. It has a lot to do with the kind of environment you grew up in. And it's a place that's quite active, you know, where we go out and we meet friends. It's quite busy. And so a full moon in this time, you know, in this place could really bring up a lot of emotion around your sense of belonging to your community. You might find some of the people in your community are also feeling quite enervated, you know, that they're quite emotional, they're quite, their energy is not as natural as usual. You know, everybody's just on high alert. So it might feel a little bit on edge at home around that time, and in your local community. But you might be feeling that, you know, I also see this as a bit nostalgic. You might be remembering the good old days, the days when everyone was more connected. You might be feeling the missing of it. I always think the 3rd house is a little bit like being part of a pack, like you know where you belong, and it is quite social. So if you're feeling a bit isolated, that might also explain it. You know, with a full moon, the moon's always in opposition to the sun, and the sun is in the 9th house, which is far, far away from where you grew up. You know, there's a lot of energy up here in your 9th house right now, which is really encouraging you to explore and to have a much bigger worldview. And yet there's a part of you that really just wants to get cozy in the environment and the sort of people where everyone knows your name, where your accents all match, and, you know, where you know you're home, you know. So I think the full moon is bringing up some possible homesickness, or maybe a time sickness, you know, where you're remembering that time, that nostalgia. And, you know, 3 days later, Uranus is moving back in here. You know, Uranus went into Gemini earlier this year on the 7th, but he's coming back and he's going to be here for 6 months before moving back into Gemini. And so he's here to stir things up. You know, Uranus is a very changing planet. You know, our energies change, our frequency shifts. It can be very chaotic. You know, Uranus is a stop-start kind of energy, but it's raising consciousness. And so you might find that the home that you've been pining after, or the past that you think is long forgotten, could be brought back to life. Uranus here might be breathing some fresh air into doing that. Or, you know, Uranus here might be showing you that actually your community has changed, as is natural, and it's time for you to change your attitudes towards your community and to either love it and accept the changes it's going through, or to consider moving somewhere else. You know, so I do feel that Uranus here is here to get you to finally make up your mind, so that the things that aren't going to persist, you can stop and cut off and really move forwards. It might be that you're meant to be doing some big change within your community. But to me, it does feel like there is a fresh outlook that's needed for you to be able to feel that new sense of belonging. Maybe it's time to expect something new from the people around you and to encourage it. Now, at the same time as this is going on, so we've got this feeling of emotions in the community and, around your peer and stuff, possibly nostalgia, and this feeling, this much longer term feeling that maybe things need to be shaken up a little bit. You've also got Mars going into your 10th house. Now, this is a very prominent place to have Mars. This is a time when you're stepping into your natural authority, feeling a lot more confident. You might also get a little bit of conflict with authority. If you're feeling quite big, you might feel that you don't want someone bigger than you telling you what to do. So we have to watch that usually with Mars in Sagittarius. But if you're ready to take on extra responsibility, that can be a time when you really, really work hard and you get noticed for it as well. We've also got Venus going into the sign of Scorpio on the 6th. As she comes into this very relaxed and philosophical part of the world, you're reminded that not only do you have a lot of energy to be working hard and progressing in what it is you want to do, but it also feels like you've got the charm and the ease to explore life and explore different subjects, and it feels like you're quite excited to dive right in. There's things you might want to learn. There's probably people that you can learn from. This could be a good time to enter into a mentorship or to help other people achieve what it is you've already achieved. The 9th house is a real it's a place of deep learning and contextual learning. And I think with Venus here, there's lots of relational opportunities for you to share information, share context, and get a much bigger sense of what's going on. So I think that's really quite helpful. And then we've also got Mercury going retrograde in the sign of Sagittarius. Even though you're working hard in your career, you've got some doubts. There's a few things to work out. And the retrograde here is really encouraging you just to rethink your direction. Just make sure that the things you're committing to are really going to get the yields that you're expecting. But it's pretty helpful. But like I said, there's some things to think about. Now, let's move. So that's the first 6 days, the 4th to the 9th. That's a really sort of like busy time. The next information, this next timestamp is between the 19th and the 22nd. So this is the bit that I think that you're going to make a decision during. So let's have a look now between the 19th and 22nd. This is the time that I think you're going to be making a decision. And the new moon and Mercury retrograde and the Mercury cazimi are all kind of coming together in one place. This is a real sort of nexus point of decision making. Now, the 9th house is a place where we're looking for greater context, greater meaning, but also a greater sense of freedom. And that freedom and liberty might come from study, might come from sharing what you've got. It might come from a learning environment. This is a place of higher context living. It's spiritual, it's religious, it's philosophical, sometimes even political. There's a lot going on here. If you've got a legal case going on, for instance, the 9th house is absolutely associated with legal things. A new moon here could be really showing you where there's a new start, a fresh new vision at this particular time. If any of those things sort of are resonating with your life, this is the kind of, this is the time in the month ahead, the 20th of November. This is the time to make a really big declaration to yourself about how you're going to use this energy. This is beautiful, open, transforming energy for you to enjoy. Beyond the new moon, on the 22nd, I said at the start, you've got these 3 green lights. The sun going into the sign of Sagittarius is, another green light that you're on the right path. This is a time when you're at the top of your career. You've already got Mars up here as well, which is, so it feels like things are really moving forwards. Venus going into Sagittarius on the 30th is also another time when you're going to be looking you'll be looked on favorably by people in, you know, your business, by people you want to influence in your business. Your influence is really at the highest it could get. And then the other thing not to forget is that Mercury is going to go direct again and is facing forwards, throughout the rest of Scorpio. And, his next movement will be into the sign of Sagittarius. So it's all go from the 22nd. So, to sum it all up, there's this reminder about this sort of energy that you're living in, your community, and what that might mean, versus these new adventures, these new considerations, this kind of far out quality that you've not really explored for a while, that you might want to take into your career. So this is an exciting time for you, Pisces. Sending you loads of love. I hope you have a fabulous November, and catch up with you real soon. Bye for now. So there you go. They're my thoughts for November for all 12 signs of the zodiac, and also my thoughts about November in general, all the themes. I mean, strikingly, those oppositions from Uranus to Mercury, Venus, Mars, and also the Sun, they're creating a break state from all the things we usually do. It's really there to encourage us to start over, to start fresh, and to have a whole new intention. I love the passion of the new moon, which is also a Cazimi at the tail end of Scorpio. Very, very important time ahead for us. So I'm going to leave that there, sending you loads and loads of love. And of course, if you want to connect with me in any way, shape or form, please feel free to do so. You can see all of my details on my channel page and below in the details here. I look forward to working with you real soon. Lots and lots of love to you. Catch up with you soon. Bye for now.